The world knows Elon Musk as the visionary behind Tesla, SpaceX, and countless other groundbreaking innovations. He is a billionaire, an icon of technology and progress, a man whose very name is synonymous with the future. But what would happen if the world's most influential man were to suddenly disappear from the spotlight? What if, for just a moment, Elon Musk could walk through the world as anyone else, without his fortune, his fame, or his recognition? What if he became invisible, just another face in the crowd? Would people still see him for who he truly is? Or would he be lost in the noise, discarded like countless others? It all began with a simple question. What would happen if Elon Musk went undercover as a homeless man? As absurd as it sounded, the more Elon thought about it, the more the idea intrigued him. He had spent years living in a bubble, surrounded by the wealth and power that came with his success. But, for all his achievements, there was one thing Elon had never experienced: the raw, unfiltered world of everyday people. He knew what it was like to make decisions that shaped industries, to break barriers no one thought possible. But what about the person on the street? Someone with no money, no status, and no chance? Elon was about to find out. One morning, after weeks of planning, he stood in front of the mirror, dressed in clothes that were barely more than rags. His hair was unkempt, his face smudged with dirt, and his eyes, usually filled with purpose, were now clouded with the uncertainty of someone trying to fit into a world where he didn't belong. With a deep breath, he walked out of the door and into the unknown. His destination? A Toyota dealership. As Elon approached the dealership, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision. Was he really ready to face what came next? Would he be able to see the world through the eyes of someone who had nothing? The questions loomed large, but Elon knew this was the only way to truly understand the world he had spent so much time trying to change. As he stepped inside the dealership, the scent of polished cars and fresh paint hit him immediately. But it wasn't the cars that grabbed his attention. It was the looks of judgment. A few eyes lingered on him with curiosity, but most seemed to quickly dismiss him, assuming he was just another homeless person looking for a handout. A nervous salesperson approached him, their smile thin and forced. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone more polite than welcoming. Elon smiled to himself, trying to suppress the growing tension in his chest. This is it, he thought. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. The moment he'd be judged not for his billions or his title, but for who he was at his core. And in that moment, he realized something important. No matter how rich, powerful, or influential a person became, they could still be treated like a nobody. The question was, would they be able to handle it? "Yes," Elon replied, his voice steady. "I'm here to look at a car." Elon Musk's story was anything but ordinary. From a young age, he exhibited a brilliance that set him apart from his peers. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, Elon was the son of a Canadian model and a South African electromechanical engineer. He was a quiet, introspective child, often lost in his own thoughts, reading books on physics, computing, and technology. His parents' divorce when he was just 10 years old left a deep scar, and he often found solace in his imagination. But it wasn't just the pain of his childhood that shaped him. It was also the relentless curiosity that drove him to explore, learn, and innovate. At the age of 12, Elon taught himself computer programming and sold the code for a game called Blaster to a magazine for $500. It was a small win, but it was a sign of things to come. The young boy had dreams far bigger than what the world expected from him. He didn't just want to make a living. He wanted to change the world. In the years that followed, Elon moved to Canada and then to the United States, where he would attend the University of Pennsylvania, earning degrees in both economics and physics. But even as he excelled academically, Elon's mind was always elsewhere, thinking about the future, dreaming of technologies that didn't yet exist. He dropped out of a PhD program at Stanford after just 2 days, deciding that the opportunities in the tech world were too great to ignore. In the mid-1990s, he co-founded Zip2, a software company that provided business directories and maps for newspapers. It was a success, and it was eventually sold to Compaq for nearly $300 million. Elon's next venture, X.com, which would later become PayPal, was an even bigger leap into the world of finance and online payments. But it was the launch of SpaceX in 2002 that truly marked the beginning of Elon's rise as one of the most influential figures of the 21st century. SpaceX's mission was ambitious: to make space travel affordable and to colonize Mars. His vision for humanity's future extended beyond Earth, and it was a vision that would shape the course of his career. By the time he founded Tesla in 2004, Elon Musk was no longer just a tech entrepreneur. He was a symbol of a new kind of billionaire, one who was determined to change the world for the better, even if it meant taking risks and facing failure along the way. Tesla's electric cars were revolutionary, and SpaceX's reusable rockets defied all odds. His wealth grew, but so did the criticisms. Some called him a genius, others called him reckless. But Elon wasn't concerned with opinions. He had a mission, and nothing would stop him from achieving it. But as the years went on, the more successful Elon became, the more isolated he felt. The accolades, the media attention, and the pressure to constantly innovate took a toll on him. His relationships with friends and family became strained, and despite being surrounded by people, he often felt alone. For someone who had achieved so much, there was still a sense of emptiness he couldn't shake. One night, after a particularly grueling day of meetings and press conferences, Elon found himself staring at the city lights from his office window. He realized that, for all his wealth and accomplishments, there was something he had never truly experienced: life as a regular person. The kind of life where people aren't defined by what they have, but by who they are. It was a thought that lingered in his mind for weeks. How would the world treat him if he weren't Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur? What would it be like to live without the power, the recognition, and the privileges that came with his name? And so, the idea of going undercover as a homeless man was born. It wasn't a stunt. It wasn't an attempt to win sympathy or attention. It was a chance for Elon to see the world from a different perspective, to experience the hardships and challenges that many people faced every day. It was a way to understand the people he was trying to help with his innovations, not just as a philanthropist or a businessman, but as someone who could relate to their struggles on a personal level. This experiment, as Elon saw it, was his way of reconnecting with the world. It was his chance to understand, truly understand, what it meant to be judged not by your accomplishments or your net worth, but simply by your existence. And he was about to find out how the world treated someone like him when there was nothing left but a name, an identity he was about to shed. The idea had taken root slowly, like a seed growing in the back of Elon Musk's mind. It wasn't something that had hit him all at once. It had been a gradual realization that perhaps he needed to step away from the world he had created for himself, the world of billion-dollar companies, private jets, and headlines, and see what it was like for ordinary people. People like those he often tried to help with his ventures, but who, despite his best intentions, still seemed out of reach. It all began one night after another exhausting day of meetings, tweets, and press events. Elon stood alone in his high-rise office overlooking the lights of Los Angeles, the city sprawling beneath him like a glittering sea. The hum of his devices, the pings and notifications that constantly demanded his attention, felt distant in that moment. Elon had made it, more than he ever could have imagined as a young man. But the weight of his success started to feel like a cage. He thought back to his childhood in South Africa, the days before all the fame and fortune. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, but he was free. His curiosity had driven him forward. His world had been the books he read, the projects he built, and the dreams he had for the future. But now, the world saw him as a brand, a walking, talking business empire, and in that brand was no room for the Elon Musk who just wanted to connect with others, to see the world through someone else's eyes. It was during one of those rare moments of stillness, where the buzz of the world faded into the background, that the idea first hit him. What if I went undercover? What if he shed his billionaire persona, stripped himself of the status and recognition, and lived for just a little while as one of those people? The ones who fought to survive every day, the ones who had to make a life out of the scraps left behind by society. Elon wasn't naive. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He wasn't going to pretend to be something he wasn't. He wasn't going to play the role of a homeless man for a day or two, and then go back to his life, smug in his own self-satisfaction. This would be real. He would live this life for as long as it took to understand it, to feel it, to experience what it was like to be invisible. And more importantly, He would see how others treated him when he had nothing to offer but his humanity. The more he thought about it, the more the idea began to consume him. He needed to do this for himself, not for the headlines, not for the people who would praise or criticize him, but for the clarity it would bring. Maybe in understanding this world, he would understand his place in it better. Or maybe, just maybe, it would teach him something he didn't even know he needed to learn. He started making plans immediately. First, he would need to make sure no one could recognize him. His world of technology and media made it nearly impossible for anyone to not know what he looked like. So the transformation would need to be drastic. He needed to blend in. He contacted a trusted assistant who helped him find an experienced makeup artist, someone who could help create a look that would be nearly impossible to distinguish as Elon Musk. The costume would be his ticket into a life he had never known, and the anonymity it provided would give him the freedom he needed. Next, Elon had to pick a location, somewhere where he could test his theory without drawing attention. A Toyota dealership had caught his eye. It wasn't a luxury brand, but it was a place where people from all walks of life came. It would give him a chance to see how the everyday person, whether a potential customer or a salesperson, would react to him in his altered state. Plus, buying a car would give him a tangible goal, something to do while undercover, something that required interaction with the people around him. A Toyota dealership felt like the right place. Not too fancy, not too casual. It was neutral ground, the perfect spot to observe. As the day for his experiment approached, Elon couldn't shake the nervousness that bubbled beneath the surface. His mind kept racing with thoughts. What if people reject me outright? What if they see through my disguise? What if this turns out to be a disaster? The fear was there, but it didn't stop him. He had lived a life defined by risks, whether it was investing his own money into Tesla when it seemed doomed to fail or launching rockets into space with no guarantees of success. This, too, would be a risk worth taking. But there was a deeper thought he couldn't shake. The world he had built, the billions of dollars, the cars, the rockets, did it matter as much as he thought? Would this experiment help him find an answer to that question? Or would he be forever trapped in the cycle of wanting more, always chasing something that, perhaps, he would never be able to hold? As the days passed and the plan took shape, the last hurdle was deciding when. The timing had to be perfect. Elon didn't want his appearance at the dealership to seem staged, to seem like a stunt. He needed to disappear into the crowd, so his every move could be assessed without suspicion. After days of contemplation, he chose a quiet afternoon, a time when the dealership wouldn't be too busy, but when there would still be enough people around to test his hypothesis. The moment arrived sooner than he expected. With his disguise ready and the date set, Elon took one last look in the mirror. He hardly recognized the man staring back at him. The man with unkempt hair, the wrinkled jacket, the dirt-smudged face. He was no longer the tech mogul who could change the world. He was someone entirely different. Let's see what happens, he thought, and with that, he walked out the door, the world awaiting him on the other side. The drive to the Toyota dealership was quieter than Elon expected. The hum of the car's engine seemed distant, almost muffled, as if the world outside had become a different place. The city of Los Angeles, with its sprawling highways and towering buildings, felt alien through the fog of his disguise. It was the first time in years that Elon hadn't been recognized wherever he went. No flashing cameras, no reporters, no fans eager to take a selfie. Just him. Just Elon as a man without status, without wealth. As the car pulled into the dealership's lot, Elon noticed a few other vehicles parked nearby, the type of cars anyone might drive on an ordinary day. Modest sedans, a couple of older trucks, and a few compact hatchbacks. No one would notice him among these. It was perfect. He parked the car at the far end of the lot, away from the entrance, and sat in the driver's seat for a moment, letting the reality of the situation settle over him. This is it, he thought. Taking a deep breath, Elon stepped out of the car and adjusted the oversized jacket he'd borrowed. His appearance was deliberately unkempt, the kind of look that said, "I'm not here to impress." He looked like someone who had been on the streets for a while, someone who had given up on the world's expectations. The torn jeans and scuffed shoes completed the picture, and a bit of dirt smeared across his face gave him a well-worn appearance. He couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability that washed over him as he walked toward the dealership. For the first time in a long time, he was anonymous. It was both liberating and unsettling. As he approached the showroom, the glass doors automatically slid open, revealing the bright, shiny rows of cars inside. The gleaming models, from the modest Corollas to the sportier Camrys, stood in stark contrast to his disheveled appearance. He hesitated at the threshold for a moment, scanning the room, trying to find his footing in this new world. Inside, the dealership was calm but busy enough to create a buzz of activity. A couple of salespeople were engaged in conversations with customers, while a few others stood by, waiting for their next interaction. The air smelled faintly of new leather and fresh paint, the soft glow of fluorescent lights casting a sterile, almost corporate atmosphere over everything. Elon's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped fully inside. For a brief moment, no one noticed him. But then, a middle-aged salesman, dressed in a crisp shirt and tie, spotted him. The man's eyes flicked to Elon, then away, dismissing him in an instant. "Can I help you, sir?" the salesman asked, his voice polite, yet detached. There was no warmth, no curiosity in his tone, just the professional politeness that came with a sales job. Elon tried to keep his voice steady, adopting the same tone he might have used if he were at one of his own company meetings. "Yes, I'm interested in buying a car," he replied simply, offering a faint smile. The salesman's expression didn't change. He seemed to assess Elon quickly, perhaps judging his appearance before mentally calculating the likelihood that this person would make a purchase. After a quick glance, the salesman nodded. "Of course. We've got a few good options in the back. Let me show you what we have." He started to walk away, gesturing for Elon to follow. Elon trailed behind, careful to observe everything around him. The people at the dealership were all busy with their own lives, with their own priorities. No one seemed to notice him beyond his ragged clothes. The salesman led him toward the back of the showroom where the mid-range models were displayed. Elon kept his head low, not wanting to attract attention. He wanted to see what it was like to exist in this world. This world of people who had no reason to look up to him, no reason to know who he was. The salesman didn't seem interested in asking about Elon's background or motivations. He simply pointed to the cars, outlining the features and options with practiced ease. "The Toyota Camry is a great choice for someone looking for reliability and comfort," the salesman said, gesturing to the sleek sedan. "It's affordable and offers great fuel efficiency." Elon nodded along, pretending to consider the car. He wasn't interested in purchasing anything, of course. This wasn't about the car. It was about the experience. He wanted to see how people treated him, how they responded when they saw nothing but a homeless man standing in front of them. As they continued walking through the dealership, Elon couldn't help but notice the subtle judgments in the air. Some of the other salespeople were casting quick glances in his direction, probably wondering if he was a serious buyer or just another person wandering in from the street. They would likely never guess who he truly was, but Elon could feel the shift in energy. The way people moved around him, their assumptions forming based on nothing more than his appearance. And then, as if to punctuate the moment, another man, probably in his late 40s, approached the salesperson with a confident stride. He was well-dressed, with a clean-cut appearance that spoke of someone who belonged in this environment. Elon watched as the salesperson's demeanor instantly shifted. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I assist you today?" the salesman said, his tone now warm and eager, his attention fully focused on the new customer. Elon was all too aware of the contrast. The way the salesman's whole body language changed. The way the other customers turned their heads just slightly, noting the difference between the man in front of them and the man trailing behind him in ragged clothes. It was a subtle thing, but Elon felt it acutely. The difference between being seen as someone important and being dismissed. He wasn't just a potential customer here. He was invisible, nothing more than an obstacle in the way of a real sale. But Elon didn't mind. In fact, it was exactly what he had hoped for. He wanted to understand the reality of this world, to see how people treated him when they didn't know who he was. And so far, it was unfolding just as he had imagined. He wasn't treated like a billionaire, like an innovator, like the person who would change the future. He was just another person trying to find a way in a world that didn't have time for people like him. Elon's senses heightened as he walked deeper into the dealership, his eyes darting around. observing everything with the keen awareness of a man who was used to being in control but had, for the moment, relinquished it. The bright showroom lights, the polished floors, the well-organized rows of vehicles. It all felt so foreign, so distant from the chaos and unpredictability of the life he had known for years. In this space, no one seemed to care who he was. And strangely, that was exactly what he had wanted. The salesperson, whose name Elon had learned was Rick, continued to guide him through the options, but his words were now nothing more than background noise. Elon's attention had shifted to the people around him, the ones who passed through the showroom in a hurry, who stopped briefly to glance at the cars, but mostly just went about their business without noticing him. Then came a moment of unexpected clarity. A young woman, probably in her early 30s, walked into the dealership with a toddler on her hip. She was dressed in faded jeans, a cozy sweater, and sneakers, a far cry from the perfectly manicured image one might expect at a car dealership. As she passed by, she hesitated, casting a brief look in Elon's direction. He was standing near the back of the showroom, his unkempt appearance drawing just enough attention to register. It was then that Elon realized. She saw me. She gave him a warm, fleeting smile, not the type of smile you'd give a friend or someone you knew, but the kind of smile you offer to someone you recognize as struggling, someone who perhaps didn't have the things they once had or didn't quite belong in the world they found themselves in. For a split second, Elon's heart ached. It was a smile that could have been offered to anyone on the street, someone homeless, someone in need of a little kindness. It was a reminder that sometimes, people who had little left to give were still capable of sharing the simplest forms of human connection. The woman and her child moved toward the sales counter, and Rick, oblivious to the brief encounter, continued his pitch about the latest Toyota Corolla. But Elon's mind was now elsewhere. The smile had been a revelation. It wasn't that it was anything particularly special, but it was genuine. This woman saw him not for his appearance, not for his wealth or his social standing, but as another human being in a shared space. She was the first person who didn't treat him like a curiosity or an object of pity. She saw him, and in that brief interaction, something in Elon shifted. He wasn't the only one, though. As the hours passed, more and more customers came and went, and each one, while polite, seemed to pass him by with the same detached glance. They didn't look for a deeper connection. They didn't stop to ask questions or offer help. Some made sure to keep their distance, unwilling to interact with someone who didn't fit in. It wasn't that people were cruel. It was simply that they were caught up in their own lives, their own concerns, and Elon, with his disheveled look, was just another part of the background. The dealership buzzed with activity, but the only time anyone really noticed him was when he moved through the showroom. If he accidentally bumped into someone, they would immediately step aside, avoiding eye contact. When Rick suggested a car model and Elon expressed disinterest, the salesman would nod politely but seem eager to move on to the next potential buyer. In many ways, Elon felt invisible. People didn't care about his opinion or his thoughts. He was just a faceless figure, a transient presence in a space that was meant for people with money, people who could afford to buy a car. As the day wore on, Elon began to wonder if this was what many people experienced every day. The feeling of being ignored, dismissed, or overlooked. And even though the interactions he witnessed weren't overtly negative, the subtle indifference began to wear on him. The contrast with the earlier moment of human connection, the fleeting smile from the young mother, became even starker. It wasn't lost on Elon that, in this world, it was the small, seemingly insignificant gestures that meant the most. For all the opulence and wealth he had built, it was the smile of a stranger who saw him, a person who recognized his existence for what it was, that made the deepest impact. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Rick continued to present various options, none of which piqued his interest. The more he sat there, the more the dealership's glossy surfaces and pristine cars seemed irrelevant to him. What mattered more now was what he had started to feel. The isolation of being someone who had once been central to every conversation, every decision, and every move, now feeling as if he was completely outside of the world he used to dominate. In those quiet moments of observation, Elon began to understand something profound. People weren't necessarily hostile to those who had less, they were just apathetic. People who were too busy with their own lives couldn't afford the energy it took to notice those who had nothing. And even if they did, most wouldn't know how to bridge that gap. It was easier to pretend it didn't exist. Rick, now noticing that Elon hadn't made any decision after several hours, started to look increasingly uneasy. The dealership's quiet hum of activity continued around them, but the longer Elon remained there without showing interest, the more the salespeople seemed to look at him like a puzzle they couldn't solve. Finally, after an awkward silence, Rick said, "Sir, if you're not quite ready to buy, feel free to come back whenever you'd like. We're always here." Elon gave a brief nod. He appreciated Rick's professionalism, but he was ready to leave. The experiment, in a way, had reached its conclusion. He hadn't bought a car, of course. He hadn't even been able to ask all the questions he wanted to. But something important had shifted in him. His time in the dealership had granted him a perspective he could never have gained from a high-rise office or a private jet. It wasn't just the indifference that bothered him. It was the sense of being disconnected, of being lost in a world that moved on without him. As he turned to leave, he saw Rick's eyes flicker over him one last time. A glance that, for a fraction of a second, seemed to acknowledge the oddity of his presence. The salesman's eyes held a mixture of confusion and pity, but most of all, he seemed to see nothing more than the facade Elon had worked hard to construct. No one knew who he was. He was just a person who had come into the dealership and left again, as if he never mattered at all. Elon left the dealership feeling strangely empty. The rawness of the experience lingered with him, gnawing at the edges of his mind. He had known, of course, that people without wealth or status faced daily struggles, but nothing had prepared him for the feeling of being completely disregarded, as if he were a mere shadow passing through a world that didn't notice. He didn't head straight home. Instead, he walked aimlessly through the streets, his hands jammed deep into the pockets of the oversized jacket. The cold air stung his face, but he welcomed it. The discomfort of the physical world seemed a relief compared to the emotional weight he carried. Every step he took, every glance from passers-by, felt more personal than he ever expected. The busy streets of Los Angeles were as frenetic as ever. People hustled past him, caught in their own worlds. To them, he was just another face in the crowd, perhaps a homeless man or a wanderer with nowhere to go. But to Elon, it felt as if the city was teeming with a million untold stories. Everyone was carrying their own burdens, their own battles, but those stories were hidden behind polished appearances and scripted lives. As he walked further, his thoughts began to shift. He began to think about the people he had observed earlier at the dealership, the ones who had passed him by with little more than a glance. How many of them had faced struggles he couldn't see? How many had been on the edge of losing it all, but somehow managed to keep up the appearance of normalcy? The contrast between his own wealth and success, which had always insulated him from the hardships of the world, and the quiet struggles of others was becoming clearer with each passing moment. It was then that Elon saw a small park tucked between two high-rise buildings. It wasn't much, just a patch of grass with a few benches, but it offered a quiet escape from the chaos of the streets. Without thinking, he made his way over and sat on one of the benches. The park was surprisingly empty, save for an elderly man sitting alone on the far side, feeding pigeons. Elon took a deep breath and allowed himself to sink into the quiet. Here, in this small, secluded corner of the city, the outside world seemed to fade away. The noise, the rush of cars and people, the demands of his own life, they all faded into the background. In this moment, there was only the present, only the quiet sound of leaves rustling in the breeze and the soft cooing of pigeons. As he sat there, trying to collect his thoughts, he noticed the elderly man. The man, who looked like he had lived through more than his share of hardships, seemed completely at peace, despite his apparent poverty. His clothes were worn and threadbare, his face weathered by time, but there was a serenity about him that Elon found striking. The man looked over at Elon, noticing the way he was lost in thought, and smiled. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" the man said, his voice gravelly but kind. "Not often you get to sit in the sun without someone telling you what to do." Elon looked at the man, surprised by the friendliness in his voice. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to these kinds of encounters, especially not from someone who, in many ways, was just like the people he had seen at the dealership, someone whose life seemed to be lived on the margins. "Yeah, it's nice," Elon replied, his voice quiet. "You come here often?" The man chuckled softly. "Every day, if I can. Not much else to do when you don't have a place to go. But the birds are good company. They don't ask for much, you know?" Elon nodded, considering the old man's words. There was something almost poetic in his simplicity, something that resonated with the way he had been feeling all day, adrift in a world that moved so fast, so focused on things that ultimately didn't matter. "I'm Elon," he said, introducing himself, though he didn't need to. The old man wasn't looking for his name or his title. He was just looking for a connection, even if it was brief. The man raised an eyebrow, clearly interested. "Elon? That's a strong name. What's a guy like you doing here, in a place like this?" Elon smiled softly. It was the first time today that he felt like he was being truly seen. The question wasn't about his wealth or his status. It was about him, the person sitting before this stranger. He thought for a moment, then answered. "I'm just trying to understand the world a bit better," Elon said, his voice more reflective than he'd intended. The old man nodded knowingly. "I get that. The world's a tough place, especially if you're trying to figure out where you fit in. Most people spend their whole lives trying to do that, but they never really figure it out. Not until it's too late." Elon looked at the man, wondering what his life had been like. The elderly man seemed content, at peace with his place in the world, even if that place was a park bench feeding pigeons. There was wisdom in his words, something that Elon couldn't quite grasp, but felt was important. "What do you do?" Elon asked, his curiosity piqued. "When you don't know where you fit?" The old man smiled again, this time with a touch of mischief in his eyes. "I keep going. You learn to find your peace where you can. Sometimes it's just in a quiet moment, like this. You learn not to worry so much about the things you can't control." Elon sat there, absorbing the old man's words. He thought about everything he had learned today, the way people treated him when they didn't know who he was, the way he had been judged based on his appearance, the isolation he had felt in the midst of a busy world. And yet, despite everything, he had found this moment of connection, however brief, with a man who had little in the way of material wealth but seemed richer than anyone in the dealership. It was a humbling realization. It wasn't the car he had come for, or the status or the luxury. It was the human connection, the simple understanding that, in a world that often overlooked him, he could still find moments of meaning. The elderly man's words resonated deeply as Elon stood to leave. "Thank you," Elon said sincerely, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. The man simply nodded, as if he'd known all along that Elon would come to understand, eventually. As Elon walked away from the park, the sounds of the city returned, but something had shifted. He felt a little lighter, a little more grounded. The world wasn't as intimidating as it had seemed earlier. There was still beauty to be found, even in the smallest, most unexpected places. Elon didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the need to have all the answers. Some things, he realized, were meant to be discovered slowly, one small step at a time. The next morning, Elon woke up in the modest motel room he had rented on a whim. The fluorescent light from the bathroom flickered as he rubbed his eyes, still shaken by the events of the previous day. For the first time in a long while, he felt more like a stranger in his own skin than a visionary tech mogul. There was no world to conquer here, no board meetings, no groundbreaking ideas to hatch, just a man in a dingy room with nothing but his thoughts. He hadn't planned on staying in the motel overnight, but after the visit to the dealership and his conversation with the elderly man in the park, he had realized something. He needed time. Time away from the world he had created, time to reflect on the stark differences between the life he led and the lives of so many others who lived without the privileges he had. Elon ran his hand through his disheveled hair and glanced out the window. The streets of Los Angeles were just as bustling as they had been the day before. Cars honked in the distance, pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks, and yet it felt like the city was still moving in a way he couldn't quite understand. There was a certain clarity that had come with yesterday's experiences, but now that clarity was beginning to fray around the edges. He felt a pull to return to the dealership, not because he wanted to buy a car or continue his undercover experiment, but because there was something unresolved there, something he needed to see. Perhaps he could gain more insight into what had felt so out of place. What had he missed? Was it truly as simple as just being overlooked? Or was there something deeper that he hadn't yet uncovered? Elon put on his jacket, took a deep breath, and left the motel, stepping back into the chaotic pulse of the city. As he approached the dealership, he noticed that it was still early in the morning. The lot was quiet, with only a few cars scattered around. The salespeople were just starting to arrive, talking amongst themselves in the parking lot. Elon couldn't help but wonder what they thought when they saw him again. Was he just a stranger who had wandered in the day before, or did they recognize him as the man who had, without realizing it, become a part of their routine? Rick, the salesperson from the day before, was the first to spot him. His eyes widened, but he quickly masked his surprise with a professional smile. "Elon," Rick said, his tone neutral but polite. "Good morning, sir. Back again so soon?" Elon nodded, stepping inside. "Yeah, I was just thinking about our conversation yesterday. Thought I might look at a few more cars." Rick's eyes flickered for a moment, but he didn't press. He simply gestured toward the rows of cars. "Of course, feel free to take your time. If you have any questions, just let me know." Elon wasn't entirely sure why he had come back. It wasn't about the cars, or even the dealership, really. What had drawn him here was the sense of disconnect that still clung to him from yesterday. He needed to see more of the people here, the ones who had walked past him without a second thought, and perhaps, he thought, he would understand something new. As he wandered through the showroom, he saw familiar faces, customers browsing cars, employees tidying up, the hum of quiet conversation filling the air. But this time, Elon didn't see them as he had the day before. Yesterday, he had been caught in a whirlwind of introspection. Today, he was determined to look at the dealership through a different lens. He caught sight of the young woman from yesterday, the one with the toddler. She was back, with a stroller this time, and a man beside her who Elon assumed was her partner. They looked at cars together, speaking softly to each other, but their attention kept returning to the child. Elon approached them, his footsteps silent on the polished floor. The woman noticed him immediately, giving him a warm smile again. "Back for another look?" she asked, her voice kind and friendly. It was the same smile, the same brief moment of recognition that had startled him yesterday. She didn't look at him with pity or disdain. There was no judgment in her eyes, only an open, almost welcoming glance. Elon nodded slowly, unsure how to respond to such simple kindness. "Yeah, just thinking some more." The man next to her smiled, too. "We're just figuring out what's best for our family. Kids can make everything so complicated, you know?" Elon laughed lightly, feeling a small sense of camaraderie. "I can imagine." The woman's gaze lingered on him for a moment, as if she was trying to place him. But before she could ask anything further, Rick appeared again, ready to escort them to another section of the dealership. As the family moved on, Elon stood there for a moment, watching them. He felt a flicker of something. Hope, maybe? Or perhaps it was a deeper understanding of the world that was unfolding around him. This wasn't about the cars or the sales pitches. It was about the connections, the brief moments that shaped the way people viewed the world, the way people chose to see each other. His thoughts were interrupted when he heard a familiar voice. "Elon, hey, glad to see you again," Rick said, reappearing by his side. "Can I get you anything? A coffee, maybe?" Elon smiled. "I'm good, thanks." Rick's expression was still polite, but there was an undercurrent of confusion in his eyes. It was as though he was trying to reconcile the image of the well-dressed, high-profile tech mogul with the man standing before him. But Elon wasn't in a hurry to clear that up. For now, he was just a person, not someone to be sized up or evaluated. "I've been thinking," Elon said, his voice low but steady, "about the way people see me here." Rick looked at him, his brow furrowing. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." Elon shrugged. "I'm not here to buy a car. I'm just trying to understand something. Something about how people like me are seen, and how people like—" He paused, glancing around. "Like all of you are seen, too." Rick's expression softened for a moment, his usual professionalism slipping into something more human. "I get it," he said quietly. "It's not always as easy as it looks. We all have our own battles, you know?" Elon nodded, grateful for Rick's understanding. The conversation wasn't revolutionary, but it was enough to remind him of the complexity of the world around him. It wasn't just about the flashy cars or the money people had. It was about how they saw each other, how they navigated through their daily lives. And here, at the dealership, he had learned something essential. He had been looking for a connection, but perhaps the connections he needed had always been right in front of him. The day stretched on, and the sun began its descent into the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the dealership's lot. Elon stood at the edge of the showroom, watching as the customers filtered in and out. The world around him seemed to be moving and fast forward, while he stood still, trying to make sense of the quiet chaos within himself. The interaction with Rick had been a small breakthrough, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. The dealership, for all its polished cars and flashy advertisements, had become a reflection of something much deeper than just consumerism. It was a place where people's lives intersected, if only briefly. Elon felt himself drawn again to the small group of employees, the ones he had watched earlier. They seemed to embody the same quiet struggles he had seen in so many others over the years, the ones who worked hard every day, putting on a smile for the customers, but who carried with them the weight of their own lives. He thought of the elderly man from the park and how, in his simplicity, he had found peace in the small moments. He wandered back toward the corner of the showroom where Rick was helping a couple finalize their paperwork. The man from yesterday, the one who had turned down Elon's offer to chat, was still here, talking to a different customer now. Elon had learned something important about himself in the last few hours. He wasn't just here for some grand revelation about the world of the homeless or the privileged. No, this was about understanding his own place in it all. He needed to see things from every angle, from every possible vantage point, before he could make sense of it. As he stood there, deep in thought, he was jolted from his reverie by the sound of a car pulling into the lot. It was an old sedan, its paint chipped and faded, the kind of car that belonged to someone who had long since given up on flashy appearances. The driver, a man in his mid-30s, dressed in a weathered jacket and jeans, stepped out. He didn't look like much at first glance, but Elon's eyes caught something in the way the man moved, the subtle stoop of his shoulders that spoke volumes about the weight he carried. The man didn't glance at the showroom or the shiny cars in the lot. He simply walked to the edge of the parking area, took a deep breath, and then began to head toward the dealership side entrance. It wasn't the kind of person Elon expected to see at a place like this. In fact, he wasn't sure why he had noticed him at all. After all, it was just another customer, right? But there was something in the man's demeanor that made Elon feel drawn to him, as if some invisible force had quietly nudged him in the man's direction. Without thinking, Elon stepped away from the showroom and made his way toward the man. "Hey," Elon called as he caught up to him, his voice tentative but genuine. "You need help with something?" The man turned slowly, looking Elon up and down as though sizing him up. There was no recognition in his eyes, just a faint flicker of curiosity. "No, I'm good. Just here to look around. Not planning to buy anything." Elon raised an eyebrow. "No harm in looking, right? What's your name?" "Jacob," the man replied simply, his voice rough but not unfriendly. "And you?" "Elon," he said, offering his hand. Jacob hesitated for a moment, but then shook it. Elon studied Jacob for a moment, noting the way he carried himself. He was different from the other customers who had walked through the dealership's doors. While most people came in with a certain sense of entitlement, or at least a desire to be seen in a specific way, Jacob had a quiet, almost detached air about him. He wasn't here for the usual reasons. He wasn't concerned with appearances or making a statement. He was just here. "So, what brings you to a dealership like this?" Elon asked, genuinely curious. Jacob chuckled softly, his eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to gauge Elon's sincerity. "I've always liked looking at cars. Never could afford the nice ones, but I don't mind window shopping. Sometimes it's enough just to imagine." Elon felt a pang in his chest. He had spent so much of his life chasing after bigger, better, more expensive things that he had never stopped to appreciate the simple act of imagining something better. It was clear that Jacob wasn't asking for anything, wasn't looking to impress anyone. He was just taking a moment to escape from the harsh realities of his life, much like Elon had done when he sought out the park the day before. I get it, Elon said quietly. Sometimes, imagining is all you can do. Jacob looked at him, his expression softening. Yeah, it's all about perspective, I guess. There was a moment of silence between them, a quiet understanding that hung in the air. For the first time in a long time, Elon felt like he wasn't just a spectator to the world around him. He was actually part of it, engaged with someone who, in his own way, had found peace in the same small things that had helped Elon begin to make sense of his own life. I don't know why I'm telling you this, Jacob said, almost to himself, but sometimes I come here just to see the cars. It's a way of feeling like I've got something, even if it's just for a moment. Elon nodded, sensing the weight of the unspoken words. Jacob didn't need to say much more for Elon to understand. In a world where so much was about owning things, about possessing wealth or status, the simple act of appreciating something beautiful, even if only for a fleeting moment, became its own kind of luxury. It wasn't about having it all. It was about finding joy in what you could, when you could. Yeah, Elon said, smiling faintly. I get that more than you think. They stood there for a while, looking at the cars in silence. The conversation had shifted into something deeper without either of them trying. It wasn't about status or wealth or anything external. It was just two people sharing a quiet moment of understanding. Finally, Jacob looked at Elon, his gaze steady. Thanks for talking, man. Not many people would do that. But sometimes that's all it takes, right? Yeah, Elon agreed, feeling the truth of it settle inside him. Sometimes that's all it takes. Jacob gave him a nod and turned back toward the parking lot, disappearing into the vast world beyond the dealership's walls. Elon stood there for a moment longer, the weight of the conversation heavy on his mind. As he walked back toward the showroom, he felt a shift within himself. The world wasn't as simple as he had once thought, but there was beauty in that complexity. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the need to have all the answers. He just needed to be present, to connect, and to understand that sometimes the smallest moments were the most meaningful. The evening had settled into a quiet calm, and the dealership was beginning to wind down. The last few customers had trickled out, leaving the showroom eerily still. Elon stood by the rows of cars, his mind lost in thought. The conversation with Jacob had lingered in his mind, like a soft hum that he couldn't shake. There was something about the simplicity of it all that felt grounding. Maybe it was the reminder that happiness wasn't always tied to the things people could buy, but to the moments they could experience. He hadn't expected to feel this way, but in the span of a few days, his world had been turned upside down. Here he was, standing in a car dealership, reflecting on the meaning of life. It was surreal, but it was also deeply real in a way he had never fully appreciated. As he pondered his thoughts, Rick approached him again, this time with a more casual air, as if sensing that the usual sales pitch was unnecessary. You've been here a while, Rick said, offering a small smile. Looking for something in particular? Elon turned to face him, returning the smile. Not really. Just thinking. Rick raised an eyebrow, a little confused but not pressing the issue. Well, I hope it's been a good kind of thinking. We don't get many customers who stay this long without buying anything. Elon chuckled lightly. I'm not really a customer today. Rick's expression shifted, though he didn't press for an explanation. Instead, he simply nodded. I get it. Sometimes, you just need to step back and take it all in. Life moves fast, but it's hard to appreciate the view when you're constantly rushing ahead. Elon blinked, surprised by how well Rick understood. It was as if the young salesman had seen through him in a way that no one had in years. It wasn't just the sales pitch that had given Rick this insight. It was the way he interacted with people, the way he had learned to read them over time. Exactly, Elon said quietly, his voice carrying more weight than usual. Sometimes, it's hard to see the bigger picture when you're too busy running after things that don't really matter. Rick didn't reply right away, letting the silence settle between them. For a moment, the air felt thick with unspoken thoughts, as though both men were searching for the right words. Finally, Rick spoke again, his voice softer than before. You know, a lot of people don't think about things like that. They come in, look at cars, make a purchase, and then leave. But the truth is, those cars, they're just stuff. The things we own, they're just temporary. Elon nodded, his eyes distant as he gazed at the polished vehicles on display. The shiny exteriors seemed to reflect his thoughts, flickering between materialism and something deeper, more essential. The whole point of buying, of acquiring, it had always been about fulfilling some kind of need or desire. But in these quiet moments of reflection, he was starting to realize that those needs were often illusions. I've spent so much of my life chasing after things, Elon murmured, mostly to himself, thinking that if I had more, I would be happier. But lately, it feels like I'm losing track of what actually matters. Rick looked at him with a knowing smile. It's easy to get caught up in the hustle, but sometimes we need to step off the treadmill, you know? Take a breath and just be. I think that's what makes moments like this so important, just being present, not for anyone else, but for yourself. Elon looked at Rick, his gaze filled with quiet gratitude. For a moment, they were two people sharing an understanding of the world that transcended words. The dealer was no longer just a salesman, and Elon wasn't the billionaire tech mogul. They were simply two individuals, trying to navigate through the complexities of life in their own way. Thanks, Rick, Elon said quietly. I needed to hear that. Rick gave a short nod, his expression unguarded. No problem. Sometimes, we all need a reminder to slow down. Elon gave a small smile, feeling something shift inside him. It wasn't a dramatic realization, but more of a quiet epiphany. It wasn't about owning more or achieving more. It was about understanding the value of the moments, the people, and the experiences that truly made life worth living. Later that evening, as Elon left the dealership and walked back into the city streets, the world felt a little different. The noise of the city, the rush of people moving past him, it all seemed less important now. He no longer felt the need to prove anything, to chase after some ideal of success. Instead, he felt a deep appreciation for the small things, the interactions with strangers, the quiet moments of connection, the fleeting beauty of the world around him. His steps were lighter as he made his way through the busy streets, his mind no longer consumed by the weight of expectations. It wasn't that he had found all the answers to the questions that had been plaguing him, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was moving in the right direction, not towards something grand and external, but towards something more internal, more personal. Elon wasn't sure where this journey would take him, but he was ready to embrace it. For the first time in years, he felt at peace with the uncertainty of the future. The following morning, Elon awoke with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. The heaviness that had weighed on him for so long seemed to lift with the light of dawn. He had learned something in the past few days that felt profound, even though it was simple. Sometimes, the answers to the big questions weren't about what you could achieve or acquire, but about how you chose to perceive the world and your place in it. It was about being open to life's quiet lessons and the small but significant moments of connection. As the sun streamed through his bedroom window, Elon stretched and took a deep breath, feeling the stillness in his chest. He thought about the conversations he'd had, about Rick's wisdom, and about Jacob's quiet appreciation for something as ordinary as a car. It was strange. He had always been the kind of person to focus on the future, to chase after the next big thing. But now, the future didn't seem so pressing. For once, he felt like he could take a step back and allow life to unfold at its own pace. But his peaceful morning was interrupted by a message on his phone. A text from his assistant, Claire, popped up on the screen. Urgent. We need to talk. There's a situation at the office. The message sent a ripple of unease through him. He had hoped to spend the day processing everything he'd learned, but the weight of his responsibilities always seemed to pull him back. He quickly dressed and made his way to the office, trying not to let the anxiety of the message cloud his thoughts. As he arrived at his office, Claire was waiting for him in the lobby. Her face was a mixture of concern and urgency, which made the pit in Elon's stomach grow larger. Is everything okay? He asked as he approached her. Claire looked at him, her eyes wide. Elon, it's complicated. There's been a leak. Someone from the inside has been selling information to competitors, and it's already causing some damage. We need to address it fast. Elon felt his chest tighten. In the world he inhabited, leaks were more than just inconvenient. They were dangerous. The information that had leaked could have far-reaching consequences, and it wasn't just about business strategy. It was about trust. He had worked tirelessly to build the culture at his companies, and the idea that someone from the inside could betray that trust left him with a bitter taste in his mouth. How bad is it? Elon asked, his mind racing through the possible outcomes. Claire hesitated before responding, clearly weighing her words. It's bad. We've already seen a dip in stock prices, and some of the information has made its way to the press. The competition is already using it to their advantage. We've lost our edge in several key areas, and it's getting worse by the hour. Elon took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. He had faced countless challenges in his career, but this one felt different. It wasn't just a business problem, it was personal. The betrayal stung, and he felt the familiar anger bubbling up inside him. His mind flashed back to the moments when he had trusted people, only for them to let him down. The same anger he had felt years ago, when his first company had been sabotaged by insiders, resurfaced. I need to know who's responsible, Elon said, his voice cold and controlled. Now. Claire nodded, pulling up a report on her tablet. We're still gathering information, but the signs point to someone in the legal department. We've already narrowed it down to a few individuals, but it's going to take time to confirm. Elon paced the length of his office, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The calm he had felt just hours ago seemed so distant now, replaced by the urgency of the moment. The calm reflection of the previous days, the conversations with Rick and Jacob, seemed like a world away. But as he walked back and forth, something began to shift in him. This wasn't about the betrayal. This wasn't even about the damage it was causing to his companies. What mattered now was how he responded to it. The anger and frustration were natural, but he had learned something over the last few days that had to be put into practice now. He didn't want to revert to his old patterns of quick, impulsive reactions. He needed to approach this with the same level of calm and understanding that had begun to define his recent days. Taking a deep breath, Elon sat down at his desk. I want to handle this differently, he said, his voice steady. I don't want to fire people in haste. I want to understand what led to this and why. If someone's made a mistake, we need to know why it happened, not just who did it. Claire looked at him, surprised. You want to talk to them? Personally? Elon nodded. Yes. I want to understand. I'm not interested in punishment right now. I'm interested in understanding the root of the problem. Claire seemed to process his words for a moment before nodding. I'll arrange the meetings. But are you sure? It could be risky. I'm sure, Elon said, standing up and walking toward the window, his gaze lost in the city below. I've spent so much of my life focusing on the what and the how. It's time to focus on the why. The phone call with his assistant, as jarring as it had been, reminded him of the lesson he had learned at the dealership. It wasn't always about the quick fix, the immediate solution, or the dramatic show of power. Sometimes it was about understanding the underlying causes, taking the time to learn from the situation, and choosing a path that fostered growth rather than retaliation. As Elon turned back toward his desk, he felt a quiet sense of resolve. He wasn't going to let this situation define him. He wasn't going to let it turn him back into the person he had been before, the one who reacted impulsively, without thought. He would handle this with the clarity and compassion that he had begun to develop in the past few days. His phone buzzed again, a reminder that the investigation was still ongoing. Elon silenced it and set it aside. For the first time in a long time, he felt ready to approach the problem not from a place of anger, but from a place of understanding. Elon sat at the head of the long conference table, the faces of several key company leaders surrounding him. Claire was seated to his right, her expression a mixture of concern and professionalism. She had arranged for him to meet with the people suspected of leaking information, and Elon knew this wouldn't be an easy task. But he wasn't going into this meeting with the mindset of a CEO, trying to uncover a betrayer. He was approaching it differently, like someone trying to understand, to get to the root of the problem rather than simply punishing those involved. The first person to walk into the room was Sarah, a senior member of the legal team. She had been with the company for years and was known for her intelligence and work ethic. But her reputation didn't matter now. What mattered was the suspicion that she might have been involved in the leak. She entered with a stiff posture, her eyes avoiding Elon's gaze. He could tell she was nervous, but whether that nervousness came from guilt or fear, he couldn't say. "Sarah," Elon said, his voice calm but firm. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, sitting down slowly across from him. "Of course, Elon. You wanted to speak with me about the leak?" Elon nodded. "Yes. I want to understand what happened. If someone's made a mistake, I want to know how it happened, why it happened, and what we can do to fix it. I'm not here to make accusations. I'm here to listen." Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair, clearly unsure of how to respond. She wasn't used to this kind of approach. In her years at the company, Elon had always been direct and decisive. The way he was handling this situation felt different, more personal, less corporate. "Elon, I don't know what to say," Sarah began hesitantly. "I haven't been involved in anything like this. I've been with the company for a long time. My loyalty has always been to you and to the team." Elon studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. But what he saw wasn't guilt, it was fear. Fear that her reputation and career could be on the line. He could understand that. The pressure of working at a company as high stakes as his own could cause even the most loyal employees to make mistakes. "I believe you," Elon said, his voice softer now. "But there's something bigger happening here, something that goes beyond just this leak. It's about why someone would do this, why someone from inside would betray the trust we've built." Sarah's eyes welled up, and she blinked rapidly, as if trying to hold back tears. "I don't know why. I just want to help. I've always wanted to do the right thing." Elon sat back in his chair, reflecting on her words. He could see the genuine distress in her eyes. If she was guilty, it wasn't out of malice. It was out of desperation, perhaps a fear of being left behind or overlooked. The pressure to constantly perform in a fast-paced, high-stakes environment could break even the most well-intentioned people. "We're all under pressure," Elon said quietly, his voice softer now, almost reflective. "But there's a difference between doing what's right and doing what's easy. We've built something here that's bigger than any one of us. It's not about the bottom line or the next product. It's about the people we trust, the people we work with." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He wasn't just talking about the company. He was talking about the culture, the relationships that had formed over the years, and the shared sense of purpose that had always driven him. "I'm not here to accuse you," Elon continued. "I want to understand. I want us all to understand what went wrong so we can fix it together." Sarah wiped her eyes quickly, her hands trembling. "I don't know if I can fix it. I've heard rumors about who might be behind this, but I don't know who's responsible. I swear to you, I haven't betrayed the company, but there's something else going on. I think someone's been trying to sabotage us, and it's been going on for months." Elon leaned forward, his interest piqued. "What do you mean? Who's been sabotaging us?" "I don't know for sure," Sarah said, her voice shaky, "but I've noticed strange things happening. Missing files, emails that are being sent to the wrong people, and some of the data we've been working with. It doesn't add up. It's like someone's trying to undermine us from the inside." Elon absorbed her words, his mind racing. The idea of sabotage, of someone orchestrating the leak from within, was far more complicated than he had initially thought. It wasn't just about a disgruntled employee. It was a deeper, more calculated effort to tear down the work they had all put into the company. "I need to know everything you've seen," Elon said, his voice steady. "Every detail. I'll make sure you're protected. We'll figure this out together." Sarah looked at him, relief beginning to replace some of her fear. "I'll tell you everything, Elon. I'll help however I can." After the meeting with Sarah, Elon felt a shift in his understanding of the situation. It was no longer just about a leak. It was about a pattern of sabotage that had been going on for months. This wasn't a simple case of a disgruntled employee. There were deeper forces at work, and Elon now realized that this wasn't something he could solve by simply firing the culprit. He had to understand the bigger picture. He sat back in his office chair, deep in thought. The peace he had felt earlier in the week seemed far away now, replaced by the harsh reality of the challenge ahead. But even as the weight of the problem settled on his shoulders, a part of him felt grateful for the clarity he had gained. He wasn't just going to react. He was going to be strategic. He was going to learn, to adapt, and to lead his company through this challenge with the same sense of understanding he had been cultivating in his personal life. This was just the beginning, and Elon was ready to face whatever came next, not as a businessman chasing success, but as a leader seeking truth. The investigation into the leak was progressing slowly but steadily. Elon had spent the last few days meeting with several other employees, each one offering their own perspective on what was happening inside the company. But as the days wore on, it became clear that the sabotage wasn't isolated to just one department. The issues seemed to span across multiple sectors of the company, and it was starting to look like a coordinated effort. Elon knew that solving this mystery would require more than just gathering information. It would require a new kind of approach. The usual methods of corporate espionage investigations weren't going to cut it this time. He needed to dig deeper, to see if there was something more systemic going on within the company's culture. He had learned this lesson firsthand during his time undercover at the Toyota dealership. Sometimes, understanding the underlying problems meant looking beyond the surface. That was when he decided to bring in someone who had a reputation for getting to the heart of organizational issues. Maya Larson, a well-known organizational psychologist who had helped several top tech companies rebuild their cultures after internal conflicts. Maya was known for her ability to analyze teams and identify toxic patterns of behavior, and Elon knew that she could provide invaluable insight into what was really happening at Tesla. It was an unconventional decision, but Elon felt that he was in uncharted territory. This wasn't just about fixing a business problem. This was about fixing the foundation of the company, restoring trust, and making sure that they were all working toward the same vision. Maya arrived at the Tesla headquarters early the next morning. She was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with a calm and composed demeanor. She had a reputation for being able to get people to open up, to expose the raw, vulnerable parts of themselves that often led to breakthrough insights. Elon had done his homework, and he knew she was exactly what the company needed at this moment. Elon greeted her in the lobby, leading her to the conference room where they would begin their first meeting. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, Maya," Elon said as they sat down. "We've got a situation on our hands, and I think you're the right person to help us navigate it." Maya nodded, her expression calm but alert. "I'm happy to help. From what I understand, this isn't just a case of corporate espionage. It's something deeper, something systemic. Is that right?" Elon looked at her, impressed by how quickly she had grasped the situation. "Exactly. We're dealing with leaks and sabotage from within, but I believe the root of the problem goes beyond just a few bad apples. There's something in the culture here that's making it possible for this to happen." Maya leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepling together thoughtfully. It's not uncommon for high-pressure environments like this to foster unhealthy competition or even resentment. You've built an incredibly ambitious company, Elon, and while that drives innovation, it can also create divisions if employees feel unsupported or undervalued. Have you noticed any signs of this in the company? Elon thought for a moment, his mind tracing back to the events of the past few days. He realized that Maya was right. There were subtle signs of discontent within the ranks. People weren't working together as cohesively as they used to. There were cliques forming in different departments, and some employees seemed to be acting more out of self-interest than the collective good. "I've noticed it, but I didn't want to believe it," Elon admitted. "We've always prided ourselves on being a team here. I've tried to build an environment where people are focused on the mission, not their own agendas. But something's slipping through the cracks." Maya nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. This is common in organizations that grow rapidly. At the beginning, everyone is aligned by a common goal. But as the company scales, it's easy for that focus to get diluted, and for individuals to start thinking more about their own survival or recognition within the company rather than the shared vision. It's a cultural shift that often happens quietly. Elon sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been so focused on the external, on the products, on innovation, that I didn't stop to consider what was happening internally. I've been so driven by the need to push boundaries that I might have missed the signs of what was happening in the company culture." Maya's eyes softened. It happens to the best of us. Leaders can sometimes get so wrapped up in the what and the how that they forget to look at the who, the people who are carrying out the work. You've created an extraordinary company, Elon, but it's not enough to focus only on the products and technology. You need to focus on the people who make it all happen. Elon leaned forward, a sense of urgency in his voice. So, what do we do about it? How do we fix this before it gets worse? Maya paused, gathering her thoughts. We need to start by rebuilding trust. You've got to lead by example, not just in terms of innovation, but in how you treat your people. That means being open, vulnerable, and transparent. You need to create an environment where people feel safe to voice their concerns, where they're heard and understood. Elon felt the weight of her words settle on him. He had spent so many years pushing forward, chasing after the next big thing, that he hadn't focused enough on the people who were helping him build it. He had created a culture of speed and efficiency, but perhaps at the expense of personal connections and mutual support. He nodded slowly. Okay, rebuild trust. What else? We need to identify the toxic patterns and address them directly, Maya continued. I recommend starting with one-on-one meetings with key team members, getting to the heart of what's really going on. It's not just about the leaker. It's about understanding what created an environment where that behavior could thrive. You need to foster an environment where people are more motivated by the company's mission than by personal gain. Elon sat in silence for a moment, absorbing Maya's words. It was clear that the solution would take time, effort, and a shift in his leadership style. But for the first time in a while, he felt hopeful. He could see a path forward, one where the company could grow not just in terms of products and profits, but also in terms of its people. Thank you, Maya, Elon said, a sense of resolve in his voice. We'll do this. I'll start with the team, with myself, and we'll rebuild together. Maya smiled, a look of quiet satisfaction in her eyes. I believe you can. But remember, it starts with you. Lead from the inside out, and the rest will follow. As Elon left the meeting with Maya, a new sense of determination filled him. It was time to change the course of the company, to rebuild its foundation from the inside out. He wasn't just going to fix the leak. He was going to transform the culture of Tesla, and that transformation would start with him. The following week, Elon found himself deep in thought as he sat in his office. His mind was still spinning from his conversation with Maya. He had always considered himself a forward-thinking innovator, obsessed with the next big thing, but now, he was realizing something critical. The next big thing wasn't always a new product or a groundbreaking technology. Sometimes, the next big thing was personal growth, both for himself and for the people he led. For years, Elon had poured everything into his work. He had sacrificed time with his family, his personal well-being, and his relationships, all for the sake of pushing boundaries and achieving what many thought was impossible. But in his pursuit of greatness, he had neglected the human side of his company, and now that neglect was coming back to haunt him, the leak, the sabotage, and the growing division within Tesla, it was all a reflection of a deeper issue, a disconnect between his vision and the people who helped him build it. The toxic patterns that Maya had mentioned weren't just isolated to a few individuals. They had become ingrained in the culture of the company. And if he wanted to fix it, he needed to change the way he approached leadership. Elon stood up, walking to the window of his office. He gazed out over the Tesla campus, the sprawling grounds filled with people working tirelessly on their projects. He could feel the weight of his responsibility, not just as a CEO, but as a leader who had the power to shape not only the future of Tesla, but also the lives of the people who worked there. As he watched the workers below, Elon's thoughts turned to his family. He had been so focused on Tesla, on the mission, that he had distanced himself from the people who mattered most. His relationship with his children, his ex-wife, and even his close friends had suffered. He had always prided himself on being a visionary, but now he realized that being a visionary didn't just mean looking ahead. It meant being present, being there for the people who were helping him create his dreams. The thoughts hit him like a wave. He had spent so much time running from one goal to the next, thinking that achievement would bring him happiness, but now he understood that true happiness came from connection. The connection between himself and the people he cared about, and the connection between him and the people who believed in Tesla's mission. His mind wandered to his children, especially his sons. He had missed out on so many moments with them, all in the name of progress. He hadn't been the father he wanted to be. He hadn't been there for the little things, the school plays, the soccer games, the everyday moments that mattered more than any conference or product launch. And now, with everything happening at Tesla, he realized that the same thing was happening in his company. The little moments, the trust, the personal connections, the support, were being overlooked in favor of the next big project. But it wasn't too late. Elon knew that he could change things. He had always been able to pivot, to adapt, and to lead his company through the most difficult challenges. He could do the same for himself. If he could rebuild Tesla from the inside out, he could do the same for his personal life. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Claire. "We've got the full list of individuals who might be involved in the sabotage. We'll need to take action soon." Elon took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't just about fixing Tesla anymore. It was about fixing himself. He had spent too much time focused on the external, on building something that would change the world. But now it was time to focus on the internal, the people, the relationships, and the trust that had been broken. He quickly responded to Claire's message, "Let's meet. But we need to approach this differently. It's not just about fixing the leak. It's about fixing the culture." That afternoon, Elon gathered his senior leadership team in the conference room. The tension in the room was palpable as they all waited for him to speak. They had been working tirelessly to identify the individuals behind the sabotage, but Elon wasn't ready to go down that path yet. He needed them to understand that this wasn't just about identifying culprits. It was about understanding why this had happened in the first place. Elon stood at the front of the room, his posture confident but his tone reflective. "I've been thinking a lot over the past few days about where we are as a company, about the leak, the sabotage, and the challenges we're facing. And I've come to a realization." The room fell silent, every eye on Elon. "We've been so focused on the product, on innovation, on achieving the next great thing, that we've neglected the most important thing. The people who make all of this possible," Elon continued. "I've been so caught up in my own vision, in my own drive to change the world, that I've ignored the people who are helping me do that. And that's created a culture of fear, distrust, and disconnection." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Until we address this, we won't be able to move forward," Elon said, his voice steady but firm. "It's time for a change. We need to rebuild the trust in this company. We need to make it clear that this isn't just about hitting targets or making the next big product. It's about taking care of the people who make this company what it is." The team members exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of where this conversation was heading. "I know this is going to be difficult," Elon continued, "but we need to get to the root of the problem, and that starts with rebuilding the trust and the relationships between all of us. I've been guilty of focusing too much on the external, and I promise you, that ends today. We're going to change the way we work, the way we lead, and the way we connect with each other." There was a long pause before Claire spoke up. "Elon, I think we all know this is going to be a huge shift, but I'm with you. We're all in this together." Elon nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie he hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in years, he felt like the team was truly united, not just by their work, but by their commitment to each other. They were ready for the challenge ahead, and so was he. After the meeting, Elon sat in his office once again, staring out the window. He could feel the weight of the decision he had made, but there was something else he felt as well, a sense of peace. He had begun to understand that leadership wasn't just about pushing forward. It was about bringing people with you, about building connections, and about creating a culture where everyone could thrive. It was a personal revelation, one that would guide him not just through the challenges at Tesla, but through the rest of his life. He wasn't just going to change the company, he was going to change himself. And that, he realized, was the biggest breakthrough of all. The next few weeks at Tesla were a whirlwind. Elon's commitment to shifting the company's culture was no longer just a personal revelation. It was a full-blown initiative. He had already initiated one-on-one meetings with key team members, where he took time to listen, to ask questions, and to understand the root causes of the growing tensions within the company. He learned more in those conversations than he had in the previous year of running Tesla. But it was clear that rebuilding the culture was going to take more than just listening. It was going to take action. Real, tangible changes. Elon had asked Maya Larson to work with him on developing a comprehensive plan for transforming Tesla's internal culture. Maya had provided him with a set of strategies that she had used to help other companies turn things around. It was clear that Tesla needed to embrace some tough but necessary changes, from leadership down to the employees on the factory floor. One of the first steps Elon took was to initiate a company-wide transparency campaign. He made it a point to communicate more openly with employees at all levels. Emails, all-hands meetings, and town halls became regular parts of the Tesla calendar. For the first time, Elon was actively working to ensure that every single employee felt like they were part of the decision-making process. Not just the engineers, the product designers, or the executives, but the factory workers, the janitorial staff, the customer service reps, and everyone else who played a role in the company's success. Tesla is not just a company, it's a movement, Elon said in one of his first all-hands meetings after launching the Transparency Initiative. A movement where every single one of you matters. From the engineers who design the vehicles to the team members who keep our operations running smoothly, everyone here is crucial to our success. The employees listened intently. Elon's words were more than just lip service. They could feel that something had shifted. This was no longer about the next big product release or the pressure of deadlines. It was about the people, about everyone coming together as a team to make something truly great. Despite the efforts, the cultural transformation wasn't instant. Resistance was inevitable. Some employees, especially those in leadership positions who had been part of the old Tesla culture, weren't entirely on board with the shift. They had grown accustomed to the fast-paced, results-driven environment where things were pushed through at any cost. They didn't understand why Elon was suddenly focusing so much on soft issues like trust and communication. At one of the company's leadership meetings, the tension was palpable. Elon was sitting across the table from several senior managers, including Claire, who had been with Tesla for years and had seen it all. "Look, I get it." One of the senior engineers, Greg, said, his arms crossed in frustration. "But we don't have time to waste on all this Kumbaya stuff. We need results. People want their Teslas. They don't care about some fluffy corporate culture." Elon met Greg's gaze, unflinching. Results come when people feel valued. When they're motivated by more than just paychecks or bonuses. People want to work for something bigger than themselves. They want to feel like they matter. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to make sure everyone at Tesla knows they matter. Greg scowled but didn't argue further. Elon's words hung in the air as he looked around the room at the other faces of the leadership team. Some were skeptical, but others, like Claire, nodded in agreement. It was clear that change was necessary, but it would take time for everyone to come around. That evening, after the meeting, Elon took a walk outside, his mind racing. The old Tesla was a machine, efficient, relentless, and focused on results at all costs. But the new Tesla needed to be more than just a machine. It had to be a living, breathing entity, a company where people could thrive, not just survive. He couldn't just lead by pushing others to be faster, smarter, and more efficient. He had to lead by example. It was time to change not just the culture of Tesla, but the way he approached leadership itself. Back at his office, Elon sat down at his desk and picked up his phone. He texted Maya Larson. "The culture shift is going well, but there's still resistance from some corners of the company. I know this will take time, but I need advice on how to speed things up without compromising what we're trying to achieve." Maya's response came quickly. "Resistance is natural, especially when it's a shift in mindset, not just process. Keep leaning into the transparency. The more you model the change you want to see, the more others will follow. But give people space to come around. Some will take longer than others, and that's okay." Elon leaned back in his chair, mulling over Maya's words. She was right. Change couldn't be forced. It had to come from within, and some people would need more time to fully embrace the new culture. But he had to keep pushing forward, leading by example, and showing that the new Tesla was more than just about building cars. It was about building something greater, something that could stand the test of time, not just through innovation, but through the strength of its people. Elon's next big move was to introduce a new company-wide initiative focused on employee well-being. It wasn't enough just to change the culture in terms of communication and trust. Tesla needed to make a long-term investment in its employees' health, both physically and mentally. Elon understood the pressures his team was under, and he wanted to ensure they felt supported, not just as workers, but as people. Tesla introduced wellness programs, more flexible working hours, and mental health support services. These initiatives were groundbreaking for a company of Tesla's scale, but Elon knew that they were necessary if they wanted to keep employees engaged and motivated in the long run. At the same time, he began taking a more active role in mentoring the younger employees at Tesla. He started hosting informal fireside chats where employees could ask him anything, from technical questions about Tesla's products to personal questions about his leadership journey. It was a small but impactful way to show that he cared about the people who were helping to build his vision. And slowly, things began to change. Employees began to speak more openly about their challenges and successes. Collaboration between teams improved, and the once dominant silos that had plagued Tesla began to break down. The results weren't immediate, but over time, they began to see the fruits of their labor. Trust was being rebuilt, and with it, Tesla's culture was transforming into something new, something stronger, more resilient, and more connected. As the weeks passed, Tesla began to show signs of improvement. The transparency initiatives, wellness programs, and leadership changes had started to make a tangible difference in the atmosphere of the company. There was a renewed sense of energy among employees, with many expressing optimism about the direction the company was headed. It felt as though they were finally coming together, united by more than just a shared mission, but by a deeper sense of belonging and purpose. However, the real test was yet to come. One Thursday morning, Elon received a call from Claire. Her voice was tight with concern. "Elon, we've got a major problem. Our competitors, specifically a rival automaker, have just announced an electric vehicle that is priced significantly lower than ours, and it's got some pretty impressive features. We're hearing rumors that they've been working on this for a while, and now it's ready to hit the market. It's only a matter of time before this impacts Tesla's sales." Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The electric vehicle market had always been competitive, but Tesla had built its reputation on pushing the boundaries of innovation. He knew that the company had the best technology in the business, but pricing was always a tricky issue, especially when competitors with deeper pockets could afford to sell at a lower price. "Do we have any details on the car?" Elon asked. "It's got a longer range, a faster charge time, and a lot of features at a price point we simply can't match," Claire replied. "We're going to have to move quickly, but we need to figure out how to respond. This could change everything." Elon felt a wave of pressure wash over him. The new Tesla culture was still fragile, still in its infancy. The last thing he wanted was for all the progress they had made to be undone by a sudden crisis. But this was the moment he had been preparing for. It was time to put everything they had worked for to the test. He stood up and paced around his office. "We can't just react to this. We have to think long-term. If we lower our prices to match them, it will hurt our brand. But if we don't respond, we risk losing customers. This isn't just about competition. It's about maintaining the integrity of our company." He knew this would require a bold move, something that would not only respond to the competition but also reinforce the values Tesla had been building: innovation, quality, and sustainability. "Elon, are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" Claire asked, sensing the shift in his tone. "I think it's time for a game changer," Elon replied. "We're not going to lower our prices, but we are going to make an offer they can't refuse. We're going to take Tesla's electric vehicle technology to the next level. Not just incremental improvements, something that will blow people's minds." Claire was silent for a moment, processing his words. "You're talking about a completely new product, aren't you?" Elon nodded. "Exactly. It's time to reveal the next generation of Tesla, a vehicle that will redefine what people think of when they think about electric cars. We're not going to just compete. We're going to set a new standard." The next few days were a blur of activity. Elon, Claire, and the leadership team worked around the clock to develop a response strategy that would not only address the new competition but also reinforce Tesla's position as the leader in electric vehicles. It wasn't just about creating a better car. It was about creating a better experience, one that would resonate with customers and remind them why they had fallen in love with Tesla in the first place. They decided to focus on Tesla's core strengths: its cutting-edge technology, its sustainability efforts, and its unique brand of innovation. Elon insisted that they include features that were so far ahead of the competition that they would be considered revolutionary, rather than just Me Too features. But they didn't stop there. In a bold move, Tesla also announced that they would be launching a subscription service for software updates, allowing customers to customize their cars in real time, keeping their vehicles at the cutting edge for years to come. It was a risk, but Elon believed that if Tesla could offer customers a truly personalized experience, it would differentiate them in ways that price alone couldn't. The launch event was scheduled for just a week away, and the excitement within Tesla was palpable. Employees, who had been uncertain about the company's future only weeks earlier, now felt a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just building cars, they were building a future. And this new initiative was their chance to make a statement to the world. The day of the announcement arrived, and Tesla was ready to reveal its game-changing new product. The entire team gathered in the auditorium for the launch event, their faces filled with a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. Elon took the stage, dressed in his usual black t-shirt and jeans, exuding confidence. As the crowd settled into their seats, the atmosphere was electric. "Today, we're not just launching a car," Elon began. "Today, we're launching a new era. An era where the future of transportation isn't just about cars. It's about the entire experience. It's about what's possible when we push the boundaries of innovation and technology." He paused for a moment, letting the gravity of his words sink in before continuing. "We've been listening to our customers, our team, and our community. We've heard the calls for something bigger, something better. And today, we're proud to introduce the next generation of Tesla, a car that will redefine everything you thought you knew about electric vehicles." The lights dimmed, and the audience was shown a stunning video that detailed the new Tesla vehicle, sleek, futuristic, and filled with groundbreaking features. The car wasn't just an improvement, it was a quantum leap forward. The video showcased Tesla's new AI-powered driving system, longer battery life, and even more sustainable materials. The piece de resistance, however, was the new subscription service for software updates, allowing customers to continually upgrade their cars with the latest features, forever changing the way people interacted with their vehicles. The crowd erupted in applause. As Elon finished his speech, the message was clear. Tesla wasn't just reacting to the competition, they were setting the bar for the future of transportation. In the days following the launch, Tesla's website crashed due to the overwhelming demand. Pre-orders for the new vehicle flooded in, and news outlets were buzzing about the new car's revolutionary features. Tesla had made its statement. Innovation and customer experience were the cornerstones of their success, not price wars. Internally, the team at Tesla celebrated their victory, knowing that they had not only responded to the competition but had emerged stronger than ever. The true test of their cultural transformation had come, and they had passed with flying colors. They had weathered the storm together, and the future of Tesla now looked brighter than ever. The dust had barely settled from the launch event when Elon found himself standing in front of a new challenge, ensuring that Tesla's forward momentum didn't stall. The competition was fierce, and though the new car had been a massive success, Elon knew that in the fast-paced world of technology, the next big thing was always lurking just around the corner. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Claire. "We need to talk. Something's come up with the factory in Nevada." Elon's stomach tightened. The factory in Nevada, Tesla's largest gigafactory, had been a linchpin in the company's operations. Any trouble there could cause a ripple effect across the entire supply chain. He called Claire immediately. "What's going on?" "There's been a delay in production," Claire said, her voice strained. "The new car's production is behind schedule, and we're getting reports from the assembly line that there are quality control issues. If we don't get this fixed soon, we might not meet our delivery targets for the first quarter." Elon gritted his teeth. This was the kind of issue he had hoped to avoid in the wake of their successful product launch. They couldn't afford to have production problems now, not when the spotlight was on them. "I'll be there in an hour," he said, already on his way. When he arrived at the Gigafactory, Elon was met by Claire and a group of engineers. The atmosphere was tense. Workers were rushing around, trying to resolve issues, while others looked at their screens, nervously watching as production numbers slipped lower than they had anticipated. "Give me the rundown," Elon said, walking over to one of the engineers. "We've encountered some hiccups with the assembly line that's producing the new model." Some parts aren't fitting together properly, and we've had a few defective units come off the line," the engineer explained, shaking his head. "We're doing everything we can to fix it, but it's going to take time." Elon looked around, his mind calculating the potential consequences. Delays in production meant delayed deliveries, which meant lost sales and a dip in customer satisfaction. If the company couldn't resolve the issue quickly, it could tarnish the launch's success. "Let's go down to the assembly line," Elon said. He needed to see for himself what was happening and how he could help fix it. As they walked through the factory floor, the magnitude of the problem became clear. The assembly line was moving at a slower pace than usual, and the workers seemed increasingly frustrated. Elon knew that if he wasn't careful, the stress would only snowball, further demoralizing the team. He stopped at one of the workstations, where a line worker was inspecting a part that didn't fit the way it was supposed to. Elon looked at the worker and then at the part. The employee, a young woman named Sarah, glanced up at him. "Is everything okay?" Elon asked. Sarah hesitated before speaking. "There's an issue with the new parts coming in from the supplier. They're not matching the specifications we were given, and it's causing delays. We're doing our best, but it's hard when the pieces aren't right." Elon's eyes narrowed. It wasn't just a small issue. This was a serious bottleneck that could impact the entire production line. "Thank you, Sarah," Elon said before turning to Claire. "We need to get in touch with the supplier immediately. If they can't fix this, we need to find a new one. This is too important." The next few days were a blur of problem-solving. Elon and his team worked tirelessly to resolve the issues at the Gigafactory. They contacted the parts supplier and demanded a quick resolution, and at the same time, Elon pushed his engineers to come up with contingency plans in case the supplier couldn't deliver on time. Through it all, Elon remained calm but resolute. His leadership had been tested many times before, but this was different. This wasn't just a technical issue, it was a test of his company's resilience. Tesla had been through so much already, and now it was faced with a critical moment. This was the moment that could determine whether they would continue to ride the wave of success or crumble under pressure. Late one night, after hours of intense discussions and brainstorming, Elon finally had an idea. They couldn't afford to wait for the supplier to fix the problem. Instead, Tesla would ramp up internal production of the parts needed to keep the line moving. It would be costly, but it was their best shot at staying on track. "Elon, are you sure about this?" Claire asked when he presented the plan. "It's a huge risk. We'd be diverting resources to an entirely new line of production. And if it doesn't work?" "I know the risks," Elon said, cutting her off. "But I believe in our team. We've come this far because we take risks when it counts. We can't let this stop us now. We'll make it work." The decision was made. Tesla's engineers immediately began working on a new production plan, one that would allow them to manufacture the necessary parts in-house. It was an all-hands-on-deck effort, with employees from all corners of the company coming together to tackle the issue. For the next few weeks, the entire Tesla team worked relentlessly, putting in long hours and solving problems as they arose. Slowly but surely, the new production line came to life. The factory resumed its usual pace, and the quality control issues were resolved. It wasn't easy, but Tesla had weathered the storm, together. Elon couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as he watched the production line running smoothly once again. They had overcome one of the biggest challenges the company had faced in years. But more than that, they had proven something even more important, that Tesla was resilient. As production ramped up and delivery targets were met, Elon knew that this experience would be a defining moment in Tesla's journey. They had faced adversity head-on and come out stronger on the other side. It was a testament to the power of resilience, not just as a business strategy, but as a core value at Tesla. Elon reflected on the journey they had taken together, from the struggles of the early days to the triumph of their recent successes. Tesla was more than just a company. It was a community, a family of people who were willing to put in the work, to fight for their shared vision, and to never back down in the face of challenges. It wasn't just about the cars anymore. It was about something bigger, something that would change the world for the better. The factory in Nevada was finally back on track. The production issues had been resolved, and the new Tesla vehicle was rolling off the assembly line as planned. The demand had not only remained high, but it had exceeded expectations. It was a testament to the company's ability to adapt and persevere through adversity. But as Elon walked through the now efficient assembly floor, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to be done. While the production problems had been a hurdle, they had also served as a reminder that Tesla couldn't afford to rest on its laurels. The market was evolving at lightning speed, and Tesla had to stay ahead of the curve. Elon knew that in order for Tesla to continue leading the industry, they needed to look toward the future, beyond electric vehicles, beyond sustainable energy. The world was changing, and so was Tesla. A few days after the production recovery, Elon invited Claire and the rest of the leadership team to a special meeting. The conference room was filled with the familiar faces of Tesla's most senior leaders, but there was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. Elon had been hinting at something big, and now the time had come for him to share his vision. "Elon, you've been awfully quiet lately," Claire remarked as she took a seat. "What's going on?" "I've been thinking a lot about where we're headed," Elon said, settling into his chair. "And I've come to a realization. Tesla has changed the automotive industry. We've revolutionized electric vehicles, made sustainability a priority, and created a culture of innovation. But we can't stop here. We need to think beyond cars. We need to think about the world, about the future we want to help create." The room fell silent. Elon's words were bold, as always, but there was something different about this moment. He wasn't just talking about incremental improvements or new product releases. He was talking about something much bigger. Claire leaned forward. "What exactly are you envisioning, Elon?" Elon paused for a moment before answering. "We've always been driven by a mission, creating a sustainable future for humanity. But there's more to sustainability than just cars. We need to expand our vision. What if Tesla could lead the charge on space exploration? What if we could help humanity colonize other planets? What if we could take all the resources we've learned from sustainable energy and apply them to space travel?" There it was, the big idea. Elon's vision was not just about improving life on Earth, but about ensuring the survival of humanity by taking steps toward the stars. It was the same ambitious spirit that had led to the founding of Tesla and SpaceX. The leadership team exchanged looks. Claire, ever the pragmatist, raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about space?" "Yes," Elon replied. "We've built an incredible infrastructure in energy, electric vehicles, and autonomous technology. The next frontier is to take that knowledge and apply it to something even more transformative: space exploration. We've already got the rockets, we've got the tech, and we've got the ambition. Tesla's future is not just about Earth. It's about helping humanity survive for the next century and beyond." For a moment, the room was quiet. The idea was audacious, even by Elon's standards. But over time, everyone in the room began to see the logic behind it. Tesla wasn't just a car company. It was a technology company, a company that had the potential to change not just one industry, but multiple industries. "What exactly are you thinking?" Claire asked after a long pause. "I want us to start developing electric propulsion systems for space travel. And I want Tesla to be the company that creates sustainable habitats on other planets. Think about it: clean energy on Mars, electric vehicles designed for space colonies, and technology that supports human life in space. We're already innovating in areas that can apply to space. Why not go all in?" The room was filled with a mix of excitement and skepticism. A few of the leaders were on board immediately, while others were more cautious. It was clear that this would be a monumental shift for Tesla, but was it too big of a leap? Elon could sense the hesitation, but he also knew that this was exactly the kind of challenge that would push Tesla forward. The company had always thrived when it faced seemingly impossible odds. "We can't let the size of the challenge intimidate us," Elon said. "We've already achieved the impossible. Just look at what we've done with electric cars. We've changed the world with our batteries, our solar roofs, and our vehicles. Now it's time to think about the next stage of humanity's future. If we don't act, someone else will. We have to be the ones to lead the charge. SpaceX can't do this alone. It needs Tesla's expertise. Together, we can push humanity beyond the boundaries of Earth." As Elon spoke, the room's energy began to shift. There was a sense of possibility, of something bigger than anything they had ever worked on before. They all knew the stakes were high. This wasn't just about making money, it was about making history. Despite the intense spotlight, Elon felt a sense of quiet determination. This was just the beginning. The real work lay ahead. In the days following the announcement, the teams at Tesla got to work, not only pushing forward with their automotive innovations, but now turning their focus toward this new frontier, space. Elon had already begun assembling a team of scientists, engineers, and experts in aerospace technology. He knew it would take a concerted effort from all corners of Tesla, along with the collaboration of SpaceX, to make this vision a reality. But in true Elon fashion, he wasn't going to wait around for others to catch up. Tesla would lead the way. A few weeks after the public announcement, Elon met with his core team in a sleek, high-tech conference room in Tesla's headquarters. The mood was serious, the air thick with anticipation. Everyone knew they were embarking on something revolutionary, but the magnitude of it hadn't fully settled in. "I want to start with one question," Elon said, standing at the head of the table. "What are the biggest obstacles to sustainable space travel, and how can we overcome them?" Claire, now more aligned with Elon's vision, spoke up first. "Energy. Getting enough power to sustain a colony on Mars, or any planet, for that matter, requires an immense amount of energy. And if we're talking about electric propulsion, we need a battery that can last through deep space travel." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "Right. Our current battery technology is incredible, but it's not going to be enough for space. We need a new kind of energy storage, one that's far more efficient and capable of lasting longer." "What about propulsion?" Another engineer, Ryan, chimed in. "What kind of propulsion system can we develop for space travel? Right now, we're looking at chemical rockets and ion drives, but we need something more efficient, faster, and less reliant on traditional fuels." "That's where we'll leverage our expertise in electric propulsion," Elon said with a spark in his eyes. "We're already leading the world in electric vehicles. Now, we need to take that same principle and adapt it to space. We can't keep relying on chemical propulsion. There's too much waste, and it's too slow for interplanetary travel. We'll build the next-generation electric engines capable of reaching Mars and beyond." For the next several months, Tesla's engineers and scientists worked tirelessly. They collaborated with experts from SpaceX to design propulsion systems that could work in the vacuum of space. They also began researching advanced energy storage systems that would surpass the capabilities of lithium-ion batteries, developing solar-powered technologies that could charge electric spacecraft as they journeyed through the vastness of space. One of the most exciting innovations came when they unveiled a new propulsion system, the Tesla Ion engine. It used a combination of ion thrusters and advanced electric fields to generate propulsion, offering a much faster, more efficient means of space travel than traditional rocket engines. It was a game-changer. But there was a catch. This technology wasn't yet tested in space. The team knew that testing would require vast resources and, more importantly, the willingness to embrace failure as part of the process. In parallel, Tesla's efforts on Earth continued. The company remained at the forefront of the electric vehicle market, with the new car model continuing to surpass sales expectations. Their energy storage solutions, such as the Tesla Powerwall and Powerpack, were being deployed in homes and businesses worldwide, helping to reduce reliance on fossil fuels. As the space division began to take shape, Tesla also expanded its efforts in sustainable energy solutions for space. They developed solar panels designed to work in deep space conditions, powering spacecraft and future colonies. Elon's vision was clear. They wouldn't just be taking sustainable technology to Mars, they would be creating a model for space colonization that could work in any corner of the universe. But as the progress continued, a new obstacle emerged: time. The more Elon pushed, the more he realized that the timeline for launching such ambitious projects was aggressive. The challenges of getting to space, developing sustainable habitats, and creating the technology to support human life beyond Earth were immense. There were moments of doubt, moments when he wondered if they were biting off more than they could chew. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Elon stood on the balcony of his office, overlooking the sprawling Tesla campus in California. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the buildings and the people working late inside them. He felt a sense of peace, despite the enormity of the task at hand. He thought back to the early days of Tesla, when many had doubted the company's ability to succeed. There had been so many times when it seemed like failure was inevitable. But through sheer will, through relentless innovation, they had made it work. And now, the same spirit was driving him toward the stars. But this time, it wasn't just about the company. It was about humanity. He knew the risks, but he also knew that without pushing the boundaries, humanity might one day face extinction. The idea of leading humanity's expansion beyond Earth wasn't just ambitious, it was essential. "Are you okay?" Claire's voice interrupted his thoughts. Elon turned to see her standing behind him. He nodded slowly. "I'm fine. Just thinking about the future." "Don't worry. We'll get there," Claire reassured him. "You've always made the impossible possible." Elon smiled faintly. "I don't know about that, but we'll keep trying." As Tesla's space division continued to develop, Elon knew that they were on the cusp of something historic. Every breakthrough, every test, every challenge they faced brought them closer to their goal. A sustainable future not just on Earth, but across the universe. The dream of humanity becoming a multi-planetary species was no longer a distant fantasy. It was becoming a reality. And Tesla was at the heart of it. But there was still so much to be done. The road to space was long and uncertain. And as always, Elon was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Because in his mind, there was only one direction: forward. Months had passed since Tesla's groundbreaking announcement about its ambitious space exploration project. The company's shift into the space industry had not only captured the public's imagination, but also sparked a fierce race to the stars. In boardrooms, laboratories, and media outlets around the world, people were asking the same question. Could Tesla truly lead humanity into space? Elon Musk, as always, was determined to prove that they could. And yet, even for someone as accustomed to defying the odds as Elon, the reality of turning the impossible into the possible felt more daunting than ever. Tesla's engineers had been making significant progress with their electric propulsion systems and energy storage technologies. But a new challenge had emerged: competition. Space exploration had always been dominated by a few powerful players: NASA, SpaceX, and other government agencies. Now, as private companies began to join the fray, the race to space was more intense than ever. The first signs of competition came from an unexpected source: Toyota. Known for its conservative approach to innovation, Toyota had just announced a major investment in space exploration. Their entry into the field was a direct challenge to Tesla's plans. Elon wasn't worried about the Japanese automaker itself, but he knew their involvement signaled something much bigger. The race to space was heating up. One evening, as Elon sat at his desk, reading through the latest developments, Claire walked in. Her expression was serious. "Have you seen this?" Claire asked, holding up a news article. "Toyota's launched a new division focused on space tech. They've even partnered with a private aerospace company. Looks like they're gunning for the same goals we have." Elon frowned, studying the article. "Toyota in space? That's unexpected." Claire smiled. "I think it's safe to say they're taking a page from your book." Elon's mind raced. Tesla had a huge head start in electric propulsion and sustainable energy, but Toyota was a formidable competitor. They had the resources, the global reach, and the expertise in engineering. The battle for space dominance would not be easy, but Elon had never been one to back down from a challenge. He called a meeting with his team of engineers, scientists, and the newly formed space division leadership. They had made tremendous progress on Tesla's space propulsion system, but now they needed to push harder, faster. It was time to take the gloves off. "We've been working on our propulsion systems, our energy storage, our solar technologies," Elon began, pacing in front of the team. "But now we need to take it to the next level. We need to accelerate development. Toyota's entered the race, and we can't afford to fall behind. This isn't just about technology, it's about getting there first." The room was silent for a moment, then Ryan, the lead propulsion engineer, spoke up. "Elon, we're working as fast as we can. But the technology we're developing is complex, and we need to ensure it works before we launch it into space." "I know," Elon replied, "but that's why we're here. We can't just test everything on Earth. We need to be ready to go to Mars. We're building a future out there, and we can't wait for it to come to us. We have to make the future happen now." Tesla ramped up its efforts in every area of space exploration. New laboratories were constructed, bringing together the brightest minds in propulsion, robotics, energy systems, and artificial intelligence. They hired top aerospace engineers from around the world and partnered with other space agencies to refine their technologies. Despite the pressure, Elon was relentless. He held meetings at all hours of the day and night, constantly pushing his team to think bigger, think faster. He knew that Tesla wasn't just competing with Toyota. This was about leading humanity into a new era. Meanwhile, Toyota's progress was also accelerating. Their new division was already making strides in solar-powered space vehicles, and they had announced their intention to launch a test flight within the year. They were not just interested in sending spacecraft to Mars, they were planning for long-term space exploration and habitation with a focus on sustainability. Elon saw Toyota's progress as a direct challenge to Tesla's vision. But rather than viewing it as a threat, he saw it as motivation. If anyone was going to lead the charge into space, it would be Tesla. But first, they needed to overcome their competition. Not just Toyota, but every other company and government entity that was now vying for control of the stars. The real breakthrough came when Tesla's propulsion engineers unveiled their latest innovation, the Tesla Star Drive. It was a quantum leap in electric propulsion technology, capable of achieving speeds that had previously been thought impossible for commercial spacecraft. The drive worked by harnessing the power of ionized gases, significantly reducing fuel consumption and allowing spacecraft to travel far greater distances on less energy. The team tested the new system in a prototype spacecraft designed to be the first fully electric spacecraft capable of interplanetary travel. The prototype was sleek, with advanced solar panels and energy-efficient systems that would enable it to travel to the Moon, Mars, and beyond. The Star Drive was fast, efficient, and reliable, but they still had to prove it. Elon knew that the public, investors, and competitors would all be watching closely. Tesla had never taken the easy route, and this would be no different. The upcoming test flight would either catapult Tesla into space exploration dominance or expose the vulnerabilities of their bold vision. The day of the test flight arrived, and with it, an aura of tense anticipation. Tesla's headquarters was filled with employees, engineers, and partners who had all been eagerly awaiting the moment when the Tesla Explorer would launch into the stratosphere. On the launch pad, the prototype spacecraft stood tall against the clear blue sky, its sleek form gleaming in the sunlight. Inside the control room, Elon stood beside Claire, Ryan, and the rest of the leadership team, watching the countdown. The air was thick with nervous energy. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The rocket engines ignited, and the Tesla Explorer shot into the sky, powered by the newly developed Tesla Star Drive. For a moment, the world held its breath. The spacecraft was ascending at an incredible rate, its electric propulsion system humming smoothly, leaving a trail of blue energy behind it. Minutes later, the spacecraft reached the edge of space, the curvature of Earth visible in the distance. Tesla had just taken its first giant leap toward interplanetary travel. In the aftermath of the successful test flight, the world was left in awe. Tesla had done it. The company had proven that electric propulsion could work in space. But the victory was bittersweet. Toyota, SpaceX, and other players were not far behind, and Elon knew that the race was far from over. Still, one thing was clear. Tesla wasn't just participating in the space race, they were leading it. The successful launch of the Tesla Explorer had shaken the foundations of the space industry. The electric propulsion system had performed flawlessly, demonstrating Tesla's ability to merge its innovative technology with space travel. For Elon Musk, it was a validation of years of hard work, risk-taking, and relentless pursuit of an impossible dream. But as with every milestone, the victory was quickly tempered by the enormity of the next steps. Elon had always thrived under pressure, but the weight of the responsibility now rested heavier on his shoulders. The Tesla Explorer had reached space, but that was only the beginning. The world was now watching, and Tesla had to prove that it could not only compete in the space race, but lead humanity into the next era of exploration. In the days following the successful test flight, the media was in a frenzy. Headlines splashed across the globe. Tesla's Explorer revolutionizes space travel with electric propulsion, and Musk's vision takes flight. The future of space is electric. Investors were calling for updates, and competitors, including Toyota and SpaceX, were stepping up their efforts in response. The public had been captivated by the spectacle, and now they were eager to know what came next. Elon sat in his office, staring at a holographic display of the Tesla Explorer's trajectory. Claire entered the room with a stack of papers in hand, her face marked by exhaustion but also determination. "You've got another round of interviews this afternoon," Claire said, glancing at Elon. "The press is waiting to hear more about our next steps." Elon rubbed his eyes. "I know, but we need to talk about the next phase, not just the PR." Claire nodded, setting the papers down on the desk. "Right. You've made it clear we're not stopping here. The Explorer is just the first step. Now we need to think about infrastructure, how we're going to sustain long-term space missions." "I've been thinking about that too," Elon replied, turning toward the holographic screen. "It's not enough to just get there. We need to build self-sustaining habitats, create the technology to mine resources from other planets, and develop systems that will support life beyond Earth. The time for just proving the concept is over," Claire agreed. "We need to focus on colonization. Mars is just the beginning, but we need to start thinking about a multi-planetary future." Elon leaned back in his chair, the weight of the task beginning to feel more real. He wasn't just a CEO now. He was a leader in an intergalactic effort that would change humanity forever. As the Explorer's success resonated across the world, Tesla's teams doubled down on their efforts to develop the next-generation space technologies. They began collaborating with experts in biochemistry, architecture, and robotics to build the frameworks for human habitats on Mars. The focus was on creating self-sustaining ecosystems that would allow human life to thrive on the red planet. But the challenges were immense. The vast distance between Earth and Mars posed significant logistical hurdles. There was the issue of food, water, and shelter for the astronauts. The psychological toll of space travel was another concern. Long-duration space missions would require not only advanced life support systems, but also methods to maintain the well-being of the crew for years at a time. Tesla's engineers worked tirelessly, refining their solar energy systems to function in the harsh conditions of space. They also developed cutting-edge robotics to assist in building infrastructure on Mars and other planets. The Tesla Mars Habitat prototype was revealed, a structure that could be deployed on Mars, designed to provide everything a colonist would need to survive. The prototype was a marvel of innovation. A self-sustaining ecosystem contained within a dome, capable of recycling water and air, growing food, and providing shelter from the Martian elements. It was the first step toward creating a permanent human presence on Mars. Meanwhile, competition was escalating. Toyota's space division had ramped up its efforts, showcasing a new solar-powered spacecraft and announcing ambitious plans for space colonization. Their designs focused on creating mobile habitats for long-term travel, which could potentially sustain human life on missions to the outer planets. But Elon was unfazed. He knew that Tesla's long-term vision was more ambitious, much more ambitious, than what Toyota was proposing. His goal wasn't just to reach Mars. It was to make life on Mars a reality, to build the infrastructure and systems that would allow humans to flourish on other planets. He wasn't interested in being second place in the space race. He wanted to lead it. Elon understood that space exploration was not just about technology. It was about legacy. The legacy of humanity's first steps beyond Earth. The legacy of ensuring the survival of the human species. The stakes were higher than ever. In the midst of this, Elon was confronted with a difficult personal dilemma. As Tesla's projects expanded, so did the demands on his time. He was juggling multiple roles: CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, and several other ventures. The pressure to deliver was immense, and he knew that something had to give. His family life, which had already been strained over the years, was beginning to fray even further. One evening, after a long day at Tesla's headquarters, Elon sat in his office, staring out the window at the sprawling campus below. He had spent his entire life pushing forward, relentlessly chasing his vision of a better future. But now, with the weight of the world on his shoulders, he couldn't help but wonder, was it worth it? "Hey," Claire said softly, stepping into the room. "You all right?" Elon turned to face her, his expression tired but resolute. "Just thinking." "I get it. There's a lot riding on this," Claire said, crossing the room to sit beside him. "But you're not alone in this. You have a team, people who believe in this just as much as you do." "I know," Elon replied, "but it feels like the world is counting on me. It's hard not to feel the weight of it." Claire placed a hand on his shoulder. That's why we're here. To build something that will last. We're not just making history. We're shaping the future. Elon smiled faintly. I hope you're right. As the months passed, Tesla's efforts continued to accelerate. The space division, now fully integrated into Tesla's operations, began to take on an ever-increasing role. The company was no longer just a leader in electric cars. It was quickly becoming the most innovative force in space exploration. Elon had made it clear that he was in this for the long haul. The Explorer was only the beginning, and there were many more milestones ahead. The future of humanity, and Tesla's role in it, was now firmly tied to the stars. And as he watched his team work tirelessly, Elon realized that this journey wasn't just about the legacy of Tesla or even his own personal ambition. It was about creating a future where humanity had a fighting chance, on Earth and beyond. And in that mission, he knew there was no turning back. As the years passed, Tesla's ambitions continued to evolve, and so did Elon Musk's vision for humanity's future. The dream of making life multiplanetary was now no longer a distant concept. It was becoming reality. The first manned mission to Mars, a monumental step for humanity, was on the horizon. Elon had been dreaming of this moment for decades. From the very beginning, he had been determined that humans would one day set foot on Mars. The day that his vision would become tangible, he realized, was finally close. But the road to Mars was still riddled with obstacles. The first hurdle was the sheer distance. Even with Tesla's advanced electric propulsion technology, the journey to Mars would take months, if not longer. The spacecraft had to be equipped with everything needed for long-term survival: life support systems, power sources, and a habitat that could protect astronauts from the brutal Martian environment. Tesla's engineers worked around the clock, refining the systems that would sustain life on Mars. The Mars habitat prototype had been upgraded several times, now incorporating more advanced solar energy systems, hydroponic farms for food production, and advanced medical facilities to address the health challenges of prolonged space travel. Elon had always envisioned Tesla as more than just a company. It was a symbol of the future. Now, as the first crewed mission to Mars neared, he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. This wasn't just a space launch. It was a defining moment in history, one that would shape the trajectory of humanity forever. As the launch date approached, the world watched with bated breath. Tesla's first Mars mission would be a collaborative effort, with astronauts from various countries aboard the spacecraft, joined by Tesla's own team of engineers and scientists. The mission was a joint venture between Tesla and several space agencies, with each contributing to the mission's success. Elon was there every step of the way, overseeing the final preparations for the mission. He knew that any mistake, any malfunction in the spacecraft's systems, could jeopardize everything. The stakes had never been higher. The crew had been selected carefully, with astronauts from different backgrounds and specialties. A seasoned mission commander, Dr. Sarah Clark, an expert in astrobiology, engineer Jamal Williams, whose expertise in spacecraft construction would be invaluable, Dr. Leo Patel, a medical officer, and Tesla's own propulsion expert, Max Hernandez. The crew had trained for years, preparing for the mission's challenges, but now that the day was nearly upon them, there was an undeniable tension in the air. Would the technology hold up? Could the crew survive the harsh Martian conditions? There was no precedent for what they were about to do. The morning of the launch arrived, and the tension was palpable. Tesla's headquarters was bustling with activity, but Elon found himself in his office, staring at a display showing the final countdown. Claire walked in, her face serious, yet hopeful. "Elon, it's time," Claire said quietly, standing beside him. Elon nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. "It's a huge moment, Claire. Everything we've worked for, everything the team has worked for, it all comes down to this." "I know," she replied, "but you've prepared for this your whole life. We all have. You've always said, if we don't take the risks, who will?" Elon turned to face her. "And if we fail?" "We won't fail," Claire said, a reassuring smile crossing her face. "We've done everything we can to make sure we succeed. You've always said that the future is now. Well, it's here." The rocket stood ready on the launch pad, its sleek design gleaming in the sunlight. The crew had entered the spacecraft, each member in their space suits, their faces visible through the glass. Elon's heart raced as he watched the final preparations. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. With a roar that shook the ground beneath them, the rocket engines ignited, lifting off from Earth's surface. The massive spacecraft soared into the sky, its powerful engines propelling it toward the stars. Elon watched as it ascended, a combination of pride, fear, and excitement rushing through him. For the first time, humanity had a ship capable of taking them beyond the confines of Earth. The Tesla Pioneer was on its way to Mars. The journey to Mars was long and arduous. The astronauts aboard the Tesla Pioneer were well trained, but the psychological and physical toll of the journey was difficult to predict. The spacecraft systems were designed to support them for the months-long trip, but isolation in the vast emptiness of space took its toll on everyone. The first few weeks of the mission were filled with routine checkups and system maintenance, but as time wore on, small issues began to arise. Minor malfunctions in the life support systems, a communication glitch, and tension among the crew tested their patience and resolve. Dr. Sarah Clark, the mission commander, worked tirelessly to keep the crew focused and morale high. Despite the tension, she reassured everyone that they were part of a historic mission, one that would ensure the survival of humanity. "Remember why we're here," she said during one of the crew meetings. "We're not just astronauts, we're pioneers. We're writing history, and history has a way of remembering those who dare to dream." But even with Sarah's words of encouragement, the isolation weighed heavily on the crew. They were cut off from Earth, with no immediate way of communicating with loved ones or fellow humans. In the silence of space, it was easy to feel small, insignificant. Weeks passed, and the Tesla Pioneer slowly made its way closer to Mars. Finally, as they approached the red planet, the excitement among the crew began to rise. The sight of Mars growing larger in the distance brought renewed energy to the team. The hard work, the training, and the sacrifices were all leading to this moment. The crew prepared for entry into Mars' atmosphere. They had rehearsed this part of the mission countless times, but as the spacecraft entered the Martian atmosphere, a sense of awe and excitement filled the cabin. The spacecraft shook violently, but the crew remained calm, trusting the technology that had brought them this far. After what seemed like an eternity, the shaking subsided, and the craft touched down on the Martian surface. The Tesla Pioneer had landed on Mars, marking the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. As Elon watched from Earth, the world held its breath. The images from Mars were clear. The crew had successfully landed. The first humans to set foot on another planet were there, standing on the red soil of Mars. Elon's heart swelled with pride as he saw Dr. Sarah Clark step out of the spacecraft, her boots touching the surface of Mars. Behind her, the rest of the crew followed, and the historic moment was sealed forever. Humanity had done it. They had made it to Mars. The dust of Mars settled around the Tesla Pioneer as the crew stepped onto the Martian surface. The landscape was barren, yet awe-inspiring. An endless stretch of red soil, jagged mountains on the horizon, and a sky that was a muted orange under the pale sun. For centuries, Earth's greatest minds had wondered what lay beyond their world. And now, standing on this foreign planet, the crew of the Tesla Pioneer was about to make history. The first step was taken by Dr. Sarah Clark, mission commander and astrobiologist, who had spent years preparing for this moment. Her boots crunched softly on the dusty ground, and she paused, turning back toward the spacecraft. The rest of the crew, equally awestruck, followed her, their steps tentative but filled with wonder. "We've made it," Sarah said quietly, her voice crackling over the comms. Max Hernandez, the spacecraft's propulsion expert, was the second to step out. "This is unbelievable," he said, gazing at the stark beauty of the Martian landscape. "It's real." Behind them, engineer Jamal Williams and Dr. Leo Patel, the medical officer, emerged, taking in the vast emptiness that now stretched before them. Mars, once a distant dream, was now their reality. The first mission to Mars had begun, but there was no time to bask in the moment for long. They had a job to do, and every second counted. Back on Earth, the world watched in astonishment. News stations broadcast live images from Mars, capturing the first steps of humanity on another planet. Elon Musk, who had been pacing in Tesla's control room, watched with a mixture of emotions. Pride, yes, but also anxiety. The mission was far from over. The real challenges lay ahead. Claire, who stood beside him, looked over at Elon. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "We did it." Elon nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the live feed. "This is only the beginning. We need to make sure that they're safe. We need to build something here, something that will last." Claire placed a hand on his shoulder. "They're in good hands. You've prepared them for this moment." The crew wasted no time setting up the Mars habitat prototype, the self-sustaining ecosystem that would serve as their home for the duration of the mission. It wasn't just a matter of surviving the harsh Martian environment. It was about proving that humanity could not only live on Mars but thrive. The prototype was designed to be an all-in-one shelter, with solar panels that powered the habitat, hydroponic systems to grow food, and advanced air filtration systems to ensure breathable air. The first step was to deploy the solar panels and begin creating the life support systems necessary for the long-term sustainability of the mission. Max Hernandez took the lead on setting up the systems, directing the crew as they worked to ensure everything was functioning correctly. "Let's make sure we're on track," he said, his voice calm but focused. "We're going to need every system running at full capacity if we're going to survive here for the long haul." Meanwhile, Dr. Leo Patel worked on medical supplies and equipment, preparing for any possible emergencies. Mars was a hostile environment, and there was no room for error when it came to health and safety. The psychological toll of the mission was just as important as the physical one, and Leo was determined to keep everyone in good health, both mentally and physically. The crew had trained for years to prepare for this moment, but the reality of living on Mars was something none of them had fully experienced. The isolation, the constant need to rely on their technology and each other, created an environment where every decision carried weight. As the crew settled into their habitat, their communications with Earth became less frequent. While they could still send data and updates, the communication lag made real-time conversation impossible. This was perhaps the hardest adjustment for everyone. The long delay meant they couldn't speak to family and loved ones as often as they would have liked. They were truly alone. It was during these quiet moments that the reality of their mission began to sink in. They were on Mars, but they were also disconnected from everything they knew. The comforting hum of Earth's cities, the familiar faces of family, the vibrant pulse of life. They were all light years away. Sarah Clark had expected this. She had prepared herself for the solitude, for the isolation. But the reality of it was much harder than she'd anticipated. One evening, as the crew gathered for their nightly debrief, she spoke up. "We knew it would be difficult, but I think we're all feeling it now. We've trained for this, but we're still human. The loneliness, the distance, it's hard. I'm just asking that we stick together. This mission will test us all, but together, we can do this." The crew nodded, their faces serious but resolute. They were alone on Mars, but they had each other, and that was all they needed to keep going. On Earth, Elon and his team continued to monitor the mission closely. As the first few weeks passed, the initial excitement began to fade, replaced by the harsh realities of space travel and living on Mars. The pressure to succeed was immense. The media continued to cover every detail, but Elon knew the real story was unfolding on Mars. This was no longer just a mission to land on a new world. It was a mission to ensure that humanity could survive and thrive beyond Earth. Elon sat in the control room one night, looking at the feed from Mars. He had invested so much, his time, his money, his heart, into this mission. But now, he realized it wasn't about him. It was about the future of humanity. "Do you think we can really make it?" Claire asked, breaking Elon's thoughts. He turned to face her, the weight of the question hanging in the air. "I don't know," he said softly, "but I believe we have to try. If we don't, then who will?" Back on Mars, the crew faced their first major test. The habitat's life support system, a critical part of the mission, malfunctioned unexpectedly. A crucial valve in the oxygen supply system had failed, threatening the crew's survival. Max Hernandez and Jamal Williams worked tirelessly to repair the system, their hands shaking from both the pressure and the cold Martian atmosphere. Come on, Max muttered, his voice tense as he worked. He could feel the minutes slipping away. Sarah Clark paced outside, keeping watch over the repair process, her eyes darting to the small communication device they had with Earth. There was no way to get immediate help. They were on their own. After what seemed like an eternity, Max gave a relieved sigh. It's fixed. Oxygen levels are stabilizing. The crew exhaled collectively, the relief palpable. They had overcome their first real crisis, and though it had been a close call, they had succeeded. It was a reminder of the harsh reality of space exploration. Everything, every tiny system, was vital, and when it failed, they had only themselves to rely on. This chapter illustrates the crew's initial struggles on Mars, highlighting the loneliness and isolation they faced as they worked to establish the first human presence on the planet. The tension rises as they encounter their first major crisis, testing their ability to solve problems and work together in the face of uncertainty. The chapter sets the stage for the crew's ongoing challenges and their commitment to ensuring the mission's success. Let me know when you're ready for the next chapter. As days turned into weeks, the crew aboard the Tesla Pioneer became more attuned to life on Mars. The vast red expanse of the Martian landscape, once a distant dream, was now their reality. They had arrived as pioneers, but now, as they began to settle in, they were starting to face the daunting task of learning how to make Mars their home. The Martian surface, though beautiful in its barren, desolate way, was also a constant reminder of the challenges ahead. Every part of the crew's mission required meticulous planning, constant adjustment, and an unwavering resolve. Mars, with its thin atmosphere and extreme temperatures, was both beautiful and unforgiving. One of the first tasks was to explore the Martian terrain beyond the habitat, taking careful steps to ensure the crew's safety. Sarah Clark led the charge on the first expedition outside the habitat. The ground was dusted with fine, rust-colored sand that stretched endlessly in every direction. The atmosphere, so thin it barely provided any protection from the sun's rays, made the sky look a strange, muted orange. The winds, though not as severe as Earth's storms, still kicked up dust, making visibility poor. The crew was prepared for this. They had been trained for months in the simulators, but the actual experience of stepping into the Martian dust was surreal. The suits they wore were bulky, restricting their movements and vision, and the life support systems, though essential, made every action feel like a complex task. Still, there was a sense of exhilaration among the crew as they set foot on the surface. It was a moment that would be etched into history forever. "Let's stick together," Sarah reminded the crew, ensuring that they were all within communication range. The team set off in the rover, driving across the red terrain. They didn't know what they would find, but the unknown was both exhilarating and intimidating. As they traversed the surface, the landscape revealed its mysteries. A series of strange, jagged rock formations loomed in the distance. Jamal, the engineer, took note of the geological features. "I think we've got something interesting here," he said, his voice laced with curiosity. The rocks appeared to be layered, possibly hinting at ancient water activity, though no one could say for sure. "This is amazing," Max said, his voice full of wonder. Mars could have been so much like Earth. Maybe it still can be. But Sarah wasn't ready to get too hopeful. "Let's stick to the mission," she said. "We need data, not dreams. We can't let our imaginations get the best of us." Back at the habitat, the crew took their first samples of Martian soil. They were collected in sealed containers and analyzed back inside the habitat's laboratory, where Leo Patel and Sarah worked together to understand the chemical composition. It was crucial to gather as much information as possible about Mars' soil and atmosphere, as this would help them plan for future agricultural efforts. The Mars habitat prototype, equipped with an advanced hydroponic system, was the key to their long-term survival. The crew was already experimenting with growing plants in the Martian soil, a task fraught with challenges. Earth plants weren't designed for Mars' harsh conditions, but the team had their hopes set on adapting them, using the resources they had brought with them and learning to work with what Mars offered. Sarah sat in the lab, running test after test, her brow furrowed. "I know we can do this," she muttered to herself. "We just need the right data." Jamal joined her, his footsteps muffled by the habitat's thick walls. "Do you think the soil here will ever support life like Earth does?" he asked. "Maybe, but we won't know until we keep testing. It's going to take time." As the days passed, The crew faced the routine and stress that came with living on Mars. The isolation, the reliance on technology, and the never-ending pressure to succeed weighed heavily on everyone. Even the smallest issues became magnified in such a confined and high-stakes environment. At the end of one long day, after an exhausting exploration mission and hours spent analyzing soil samples, Sarah and Max sat down together in the common room. The large windows in the habitat offered a view of Mars' barren landscape, the setting sun casting long shadows across the desert-like terrain. "I keep thinking about the bigger picture," Sarah said, her voice quieter than usual. "This mission, it feels like the beginning of something much bigger. But what if it fails? What if we can't make this work?" Max didn't immediately respond, his eyes still focused on the outside world. Finally, he spoke. "Failure's part of the journey. We've got to keep going. The first few times we tried to build rockets or electric cars, everyone said we were crazy. But we didn't stop then. And we can't stop now." Sarah smiled faintly. "I just worry about everyone else. The crew, the people at home, what they'll think if we don't succeed." Max leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "They'll understand. They're watching history unfold. Even if we don't succeed right away, we're still showing the world that it's possible. We're proving it's worth the fight." On Earth, Elon was glued to the live feed from Mars, tracking the progress of the crew's explorations and experiments. Every report, every update, filled him with a mixture of pride and anxiety. He had invested everything into this mission, and now, as the first human colony on Mars began to take shape, he couldn't afford to let his team fail. The pressure was immense. There was the pressure to make sure the crew survived, but there was also the pressure of being the face of this monumental achievement. Tesla's resources, time, and innovation had gone into this project. If they succeeded, the future of humanity could change forever. If they failed, all their efforts might be in vain. Claire, sensing his tension, entered the control room where Elon was monitoring the feeds. "We've got this," she said, offering a reassuring smile. Elon didn't look away from the screen. "I know, but it doesn't feel real yet. I know we're doing everything we can, but what if it's not enough?" Claire stepped closer. "You've done what no one else has even dreamed of doing. You've given them the tools to succeed. Now we wait, and we trust them." Elon finally turned to face her, his face softening. "It's more than that, Claire. It's about more than just tools. We're opening a door to a future no one thought was possible. I can't afford to let it close." The first few months on Mars proved to be a test of endurance for the crew. Every challenge was compounded by the planet's unforgiving nature. Yet, the crew carried on. Their determination was unwavering, their mission clear. They had landed on Mars not only to survive, but to learn, to grow, and ultimately, to build a future. Each new day brought new discoveries and challenges. Each successful experiment, every exploration mission, brought them one step closer to unlocking Mars' mysteries. The Martian landscape, once an unknown, was becoming a part of their daily lives, and with each passing moment, humanity's presence on Mars was solidifying. As the months on Mars stretched on, the routine of survival began to wear on the crew of the Tesla Pioneer. The initial excitement of exploration had faded, replaced by the relentless grind of ensuring the habitat stayed functional, growing food, conducting experiments, and preparing for future missions. Each day was a reminder of how fragile life on Mars was. Mars had offered them its beauty, but also its cruel indifference. The storms that whipped across the red landscape could be deadly if the crew weren't careful. Temperatures fluctuated wildly, and the radiation from the sun, unfiltered by a thick atmosphere, remained a constant threat. Every action required careful planning and coordination. Every mistake carried a potential cost. The crew gathered in the habitat's common room, the dim glow of the overhead lights casting long shadows. Sarah was at the head of the table, her face tired but resolute. "We've made it this far, but we have a problem." Max Hernandez, his face lined with exhaustion, spoke up first. "The solar panels aren't generating as much power as they used to. The dust storms are messing with the efficiency." Sarah nodded. "I've been monitoring the situation. If we don't find a way to fix this, we'll be facing energy shortages in the next few weeks. And that's not even considering the upcoming supply drop. We may need to go off-site to collect more resources. Jamal, ever the problem solver, leaned forward. If we can recalibrate the filters and clean off the panels, that should help. I can take a team out tomorrow and get it done. Leo, the medical officer, interjected. We need to be careful. The radiation levels are spiking. Even with the suits, prolonged exposure to those levels could have long-term health consequences. We have no choice, Sarah said. We need to fix this now before it becomes a bigger problem. The next morning, the team prepared for the arduous mission. Sarah, Max, and Jamal suited up in their EVA gear, their bulky suits making movement slow and cumbersome. The task ahead was simple in theory: clean the solar panels and recalibrate the systems. But Mars wasn't about to make it easy for them. The red dust that covered the solar panels was thick, and the winds howled across the surface, carrying even more dust with them. The landscape seemed unwelcoming, stretching out into an endless horizon of red rock and barren soil. The crew moved slowly, their boots crunching against the Martian ground. Jamal led the charge, his hands working quickly to wipe the dust off the solar panels. Every second mattered. The atmosphere, though thin, still carried enough particles to make visibility low, and the dust storm's intensity made it even more difficult to work. Come on, Jamal muttered, sweat beading on his brow inside his suit, the heat from their suits making the air inside stifling. The harsh conditions made the task feel monumental, and every movement was a test of their will. But as the hours passed, they slowly made progress. The panels began to gleam under the filtered sunlight, and the energy readings started to stabilize. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it was enough to ensure the crew would have power for the next few weeks. Back at the habitat, Sarah breathed a sigh of relief. The power had been restored, but the ordeal left everyone feeling drained. The mission, once full of excitement and potential, had begun to feel like an endless cycle of challenges. The isolation weighed heavily on each of them. For every small victory, it felt like a dozen new problems arose to take its place. Max collapsed into a chair in the common room, his face a mix of fatigue and relief. That was brutal, he said, shaking his head. I'm starting to wonder if this is really worth it. It feels like every day, we're just trying to stay alive. Sarah took a deep breath and sat across from him. I know. It's not what we thought it would be, is it? But we can't give up. We have to keep going. For the future. For the people who will follow us. I know. But some days it feels impossible, Max admitted, his voice raw with emotion. Sometimes, I just want to get out of this suit and breathe clean air again. There was a long silence as Sarah processed his words. She had felt the same way many times. But there was no time for weakness. The crew depended on her to keep them together. We knew it would be hard, Sarah finally said. But we're here. We've made it farther than anyone thought possible. And we're not stopping now. As the crew continued their work, the strain of survival began to affect their relationships with one another. Tensions that had been building in the background started to surface. The claustrophobic conditions of the habitat, the endless tasks, and the isolation from Earth were beginning to take their toll. Leo, the medical officer, noticed the changes in his colleagues. Sarah, normally the calm and collected leader, had become more irritable and distant. Max, usually the most optimistic, was starting to show signs of fatigue. Jamal, always the problem solver, had started to grow more impatient with the crew's progress. Even Claire, who had remained a constant support for Elon, began to feel the weight of the mission from Earth. The endless pressure to succeed was starting to feel like a burden too great to bear. One evening, as Sarah sat alone in the observation room, looking out at the Martian landscape, she received a message from Elon. It was a video call, his face a welcome sight, even if he was as weary as she was. How's it going up there? Elon asked, his tone warm but tinged with concern. We're holding on, Sarah replied, her voice softer than she intended. It's harder than we thought. Every day brings new problems, and it feels like we're constantly just trying to keep the lights on. I know it's tough, Elon said, but you're doing something no one has ever done before. You're pioneers, and the world is watching. Your work matters. It'll matter more than you know in the future. Sarah nodded, but there was a sadness in her eyes that Elon couldn't ignore. We're doing everything we can, Elon. But sometimes, it feels like it's not enough. Elon's expression softened, and he paused for a moment before replying. I believe in you, Sarah. All of you. And I know this is tough, but you're not alone. You have the entire world behind you. As the call ended, Sarah leaned back in her chair, looking out at the endless Martian desert. The words, while comforting, didn't change the reality of the situation. They were alone on Mars, and they were the ones who would decide if humanity could survive here. The weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders. Months had passed since the crew first set foot on Mars, and the sense of routine had settled in like the Martian dust that covered everything. They had dealt with endless challenges, power issues, supply shortages, unexpected breakdowns, and the constant stress of survival in a hostile environment. But as the crew reached the halfway point of their first Martian year, something remarkable happened, a breakthrough. It came on a quiet morning, just after dawn, when the light from the distant sun began to filter through the habitat's windows, casting long shadows across the sterile, white walls. Sarah Clark, exhausted but determined, stood over a workbench in the laboratory, inspecting the results of the latest crop of plants they had managed to grow using Martian soil. At first, it had seemed like an impossible task, growing Earth plants on Mars. The soil was harsh, the atmosphere nearly non-existent, and radiation levels were high. But Sarah had insisted they try. They had used the hydroponic system as a starting point, mixing Earth soil with Martian dust, adding nutrients, and running experiments to find a balance that could sustain life. Now, as Sarah studied the growth of the plants before her, her heart skipped a beat. The plants, once fragile and stunted, were flourishing. Green leaves spread across the trays, and the roots were healthy. The Martian soil, which had once seemed an insurmountable challenge, was slowly becoming the key to their long-term survival. Max walked into the lab, his face a mixture of curiosity and fatigue. "What's going on?" he asked, sensing Sarah's excitement. She turned to him, her eyes wide. "Max, we did it. The plants are growing. Really growing." He stepped forward, peering at the trays of thriving plants. "You're kidding," he said, his voice a blend of disbelief and awe. "No, it's real," Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. "We've finally figured it out. Martian soil, with the right mix of nutrients, is actually supporting life. It's a small step, but it's huge." Max grinned, his tired face lighting up. "This is it. This is what we've been waiting for." Back in the common room, the rest of the crew gathered to celebrate. The atmosphere, always tense and filled with the weight of the mission, was now filled with laughter and relief. The breakthrough, though modest in its immediate results, felt like a turning point. For the first time in a long while, the crew allowed themselves to hope. Jamal raised a glass of rehydrated Martian water, a small token of their limited resources, and proposed a toast. "To the first Martian crops, and to the people who will come after us. We've shown them it's possible." Leo, ever the pragmatist, added, "It's just the beginning, though. We need to make sure this works long-term." "But I agree, it's a victory worth celebrating." Sarah looked around at the faces of her crewmates, faces that had grown familiar, faces that had become her family. They had been through so much together, and now, for the first time, it felt like their sacrifices were starting to pay off. "I couldn't have asked for a better team," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is just the start. We've got so much more to do, but we're finally on the right path." As the crew celebrated, Elon Musk sat in a conference room back on Earth, watching the live feed from Mars. The breakthrough in growing plants in Martian soil was a victory, but it was also a reminder of how fragile their efforts were. Every step forward had to be meticulously planned and executed. Claire walked into the room, her presence calm but purposeful. "It's happening. The team has successfully grown plants using Martian soil. They're calling it their first major breakthrough." Elon didn't smile at first, but his eyes softened. "That's huge. But it's just the beginning. They've got to figure out how to scale it up, how to make it sustainable." "We've done what we can from here," Claire said, her voice steady. "Now, the rest is up to them." Elon nodded, his mind racing through the endless challenges ahead. "I know, but I believe in them. They've made it this far. They've got the spirit. They just need time." The success of the Martian crops wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a symbolic victory. For months, the crew had battled with the harsh reality of Mars, constantly fighting to stay alive, to prove that humanity could survive on the red planet. But now, with the first crops growing successfully, it was clear. They were no longer just surviving, they were beginning to thrive. Sarah knew that this was just the first of many challenges to come. They had proven that Mars could support life, but they still had a long road ahead of them. They needed to scale up the crops, find ways to grow food more efficiently, and deal with the ongoing issues of power, water, and supplies. But for the first time since arriving, she felt a sense of hope, a feeling that had been missing for so long. Later that evening, as Sarah looked out at the Martian horizon, her thoughts turned to Earth. The people back home had been watching, waiting for news, hoping for success. She could feel the weight of their expectations, but now, for the first time, it felt like she was carrying something more. A glimmer of possibility, a seed of hope. She thought about the future, about the colonies that would one day be established on Mars. She thought about the children who would grow up on this barren world, who would look at the red dust and see it not as an obstacle, but as a challenge to be overcome. It would take years, decades, centuries, but the dream of making Mars a second home for humanity was no longer a distant fantasy. It was real. With a deep breath, Sarah made a promise to herself. We'll make it, one step at a time. In this final chapter, the crew of the Tesla Pioneer faces the realization that, despite the many obstacles, they are beginning to unlock the secrets of Mars. The successful growth of plants in Martian soil marks a monumental achievement, a beacon of hope that signals the possibility of a future on Mars. As they celebrate this victory, they know that the path ahead is still fraught with challenges, but for the first time, the dream of a human colony on Mars seems within reach.